Good evening and welcome. Councillor Dennis Bennyworth, Chairman of the Western Area Planning Committee, is unable to attend this evening, and therefore I, Councillor Tony Vickers, Vice Chairman, will be chairing it. The other members of the committee joining me this evening are Councillors Adrian Abbs, Phil Barnett, Jeff Cant, Hilary Cole, Carolyn Culver, Lynn Doherty, Garth Simpson and Howard Wollaston. The following officers are attending to advise and support the meeting. Mr. Simon Till, Team Leader Western Area Planning. Mr. Bob Dray, Team Leader Development Control. Mr. Mazi Maziwa, Senior Planning Officer. Mr. Paul Goddard, Highways Officer. Mrs. Sharon Armour, Legal Advisor, and Mr. Gordon Oliver, Clerk. I'm also assisted by Stephen Chard as the Zoom host for this evening. This meeting is taking place both over Zoom and with councillors present and COVID compliant in the council chamber. Following the expiry of the emergency coronavirus regulations that permitted remote meetings, all of the council's public meetings must now take place in person at a single specified geographical location with a physical presence at that location. Officers presenting items on the agenda and parish council representatives, supporters, objectors, and the applicant or agent making a presentation to the committee have been encouraged to do so remotely via Zoom. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. For the benefit of those engaging remotely, I will now ask the clerk, Mr. Gordon Oliver, to run through some standard reminders about the way we conduct council meetings via Zoom.
Thank you, Chairman. In addition to the points displayed on the screen, only members of the committee in the council chamber are able to take part in the vote for the formal decision. If we need to adjourn the meeting for any reason, the chairman will advise of the revised time and date of the meeting. If it's a short adjournment, then this Zoom meeting will recommence. Otherwise, a fresh appointment will be set out. Do members have any questions about the way in which this meeting will be conducted?
Please leave the council chamber using the fire exit to the far right and convene in the Dolphin car park in the event of fire alarm. As a reminder to members, please remain socially distanced and wear a face covering when not seated. For those members speaking as ward members in the council chamber, please remain seated and don't approach the lectern. Thank you. As we have presenting officers and members joining us via Zoom, I would like to propose a non-notice procedural motion to suspend standing orders and permit all those joining the meeting virtually, including members who are not members of the committee and officers, to speak at the option of the chairman. Does that motion find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hilary Cole. Those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Moving on, item 1, apologies. Mr. Oliver, do we have any apologies for this evening, please?
Yes, Councillor Dennis Bennyworth and Councillor Clive Hooker have sent their apologies. They'll be substituted for by Councillors Lynn Doherty and Garth Simpson, respectively.
As per paragraph 4.6.7 of the council's constitution, as there is no chairman present and the vice chair is acting as chairman, I invite proposals for a vice chairman for this meeting to be elected. Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. We have a proposal. Anyone second that? Seconded by Councillor Cant. Those in favour? Hope it doesn't need to be used, but there we are. It's good practice. Minutes of the last meeting, item 2. Actually, the last meeting on the 30th of June, the minutes are not yet ready. They will be available for the next meeting of the Western Area Planning Committee. Members, do you have any observation on the minutes of the 9th June, please? Councillor Wollaston.
Please, sir.
Second paragraph. It's just a repeat, isn't it? That the second sentence to be deleted is a repeat of the first. Thank you for pointing that out. Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just quite a pedantic point, page 20.13, with relation to something that Councillor Abb said. I think in the third line, it needs to say would have set a precedent. Councillor Abb's.
Which paragraph, sorry?
13 on page 20.
Would have, there's a missing word, the word set.
I think it's set to precedent.
Obviously, thank you. Mr. Oliver, have you got those points? Can I have a proposal if everyone's happy with the minutes with those minor amendments? Thank you, Councillor Cole, seconder. Councillor Wollaston, thank you very much. Those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Let me just sign. Declarations of interest. Can I have any declarations of interest, please? Starting on my left, Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. In relation to item 4.1 on the agenda, in the interest of transparency, I'd like to declare that I'm a member of the executive of Westminster. I'm taking advice on this matter, and I'm satisfied that as I'm not the lead executive member for this application, I'm going to take part fully in the consideration of this.
Councillor Wollaston.
I make exactly the same declaration as Councillor Cole, and also I've been lobbied on item 3.1.3.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest, Councillor Doherty?
The same declaration as Councillor Cole, but also that I'm the ward member for 4.2 as well.
Right, thank you. Councillor Barnett.
Chairman, I'm obviously a member of Newbury Town Council. I'm also a member of its Planning and Highways Committee. In the case of items 4.1, 4.3, I was present when the discussions took place, but tonight I will weigh up all the information accordingly and vote with the information that's in front of me.
Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, One Croft Road is in my ward, so that would be the next, but it's nothing other than it's in my ward. And I have been lobbied on the football application that's in this evening from several parties.
I think my own declarations of interest are a combination of Councillor Barnett's and Councillor Abbs. I'm the ward member for item 3. I'm on Newbury Town Council Planning and Highways, but I will consider both those items fully in the light of the information at this meeting. So I will be taking part and voting in both. Thank you, if necessary. Councillor Culver, missed you out.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just clarify, are we using the raised hands on the screen tonight, or are we just indicating by hand? Because I've been doing both.
I should do both. I will try looking around, but there will be times when perhaps I miss the hands, the real hands.
Okay, just to say, I've been lobbied on item 1, but I'll make a decision tonight based on the discussion and the paperwork in front of us.
Thank you. Councillor Cant.
Thank you, Chair. Just to record the facts, I'm a ward member in relation to agenda item 4.1, and I've also had a number of discussions in 2019-20 with the group representing the football interest in the town, and quite a number of emails of representation in addition.
I think we've all probably been lobbied on item 4.1. Thank you. That moves us on to item 4.1. A lot has actually happened on that. And we've had the declaration of interest, particularly important one in that this is an item where the council is the applicant. And I would like just to, perhaps when we come to the debate, and it helps to take the heat out of this, refer to the applicant as the applicant and not to the council or to West Berkshire Council. I think that will help us treat the applicant like every other applicant, which we of course have to as the planning authority. So I'm asking Mr. Maziwa, who's zooming in, I think, to present the first item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members and the public. I'll just share my screen. Can everyone see that clearly?
I think that's clear, yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the application before you presenting it is at Newbury Football Club. It's a council own application, as such is submitted under Regulation 3. We have an update sheet, Mr. Chairman, which includes additional consultation comments from Sport England received yesterday afternoon. The comments indicate that Sports England are withdrawing their objection on the application. The recommendation has been amended, Mr. Chairman, and there will be no requirement to refer the application to the National Planning Casework Unit. There are additional comments from the Newbury Society in the update sheet and a representation from Mr. Alan Pierce. These additional submissions do not alter the officer recommendation, Mr. Chairman, which is for approval, subject to schedule of conditions. Members, while Sport England have withdrawn their objection, the council is aware of a third-party request to the Secretary of State to call in the application. Therefore, following the committee arriving at a resolution, it will be necessary for the local planning authority to wait for a decision from the Secretary of State as to whether it is intended to call in the application for determination. As indicated, the new recommendation is to delegate to the head of planning, development and planning to grant planning permission, subject to the schedule of conditions. There's an addition of a materials condition in the update sheet, and that's the only addition to the scheduled list which was in the report. Members, this application seeks full planning permission for creation of an open space for public recreation, including the demolition of a former football ground clubhouse, delivery of new parking spaces, and erection of timber bollards and new fencing. There are no objections from the relevant statutory consultees, and conditions are recommended at section 8.3 of the report. The reason the application is called to committee is due to the significant public interest and also due to the fact that the proposal affects council-owned land. A summary of the representations are given at section 4 of the report. The application site is known as Newbury Football Ground and is an existing recreational facility covering approximately 1.5 hectares to the east of Newbury Town Centre. The facilities comprises a single grass playing pitch, single-story clubhouse, and up until recently, a spectator stand that has been dismantled and taken off site. The proposal will not alter the size of the existing grass playing pitch. It is proposed that the grass playing pitch will be maintained as normal to provide a grass surface for general recreational sports and where all members of the public will be able to use on a first come, first served basis. Appropriate signage is proposed and a pedestrian route map will be erected adjacent to the grass pitch, I think around here. to direct people to the public lavatories are available at the WAF, approximately 350 meters away, which is accessible via Victoria Park. These facilities will include male and female lavatories, one disabled unit, which would be available between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. 7 days a week. The final amended proposed site plan on your screen, members, indicates that the application also seeks to create temporary pay and display parking spaces on the cleared area to complement the existing parking adjacent to the site. Approximately 80 new parking spaces are proposed on the cleared area, and the footprints of the clubhouse turnstiles and the former stand areas are shown on the plan. Don't know if you can barely make the footprint of where the existing structures are. In place of the old clubhouse and turnstiles, there will also be new timber bollards to prevent unauthorized vehicles accessing the grass football pitch. In 2020, Mr. Chairman, the council adopted the West Berkshire Council playing pitch strategy, which amongst other matters addresses the anticipated future loss of Faraday Road Stadium as part of the wider London Road redevelopment. The playing pitch strategy is addressed in the report, so I won't go through the finer detail of the Faraday Road Stadium. In terms of the site itself, West Berkshire Council awarded Faraday Stadium a football ground, an asset of community value status. This was awarded in October 2016. And according to the council records, it's due to expire in October. The ACV designation, its overall objective is to provide the community with the community right to bid when the ACV is proposed for sale. However, the non-statutory advice note for local authorities advises that local planning authorities can consider the listing as a material planning consideration in determining planning application. As such, Mr. Chairman, your officers have considered this listing within the report. The council intends to make available to the public the recreational facility and parking on a temporary basis as a community leisure facility. As indicated, Mr. Chairman, Sporting Lane have withdrawn their objection. With regard to the planning balance, officers have taken into consideration the ACV status as indicated, the fact that the site is not in use at present, and the proposal will bring into a community leisure use a site as proposed by the council. The above plan, Mr. Chairman, shows the site is partly within flood zones 2 and 3 of the EA flood zone maps. The yellow line at the bottom indicates the boundary to the south of the conservation area. And there are trees within the site relative to the proposed proposal's red line, which you can see is the green round bits. There are 2 parallel applications as well, Mr. Chairman, on the same site submitted by the Newbury Community Football Group. These applications are still under considerations, and they have been referred at paragraph 1.7 in the report. It is the intention that officers will refer these applications to the Western Area Planning Committee when they are ready. Next, I'll just go through quickly just the site photographs. They are in the agenda pack, but I've included them for the benefit of all. This shows the stadium access from Faraday Road, looking towards the car park. We can see the existing car park viewed from the site access and the clubhouse. Another view of the clubhouse entrance to the south and an outbuilding. The turnstiles to be demolished. This view shows the clubhouse within the car park, the existing car park, from the west looking to the east. Again, another view from the west looking towards the clubhouse from within the car park. This photograph shows the clubhouse from the playing pitch inside the site. Also shows the area left following the removal of the stands, which is these areas here. And this is the hard standing that was left as a result of the removal of the stands. These pictures, again, they're in the pack, Mr. Chairman, but just to sort of again, just repeat them quickly. They indicate the condition of the clubhouse, which is one of the material considerations in the planning balance. So I'll just go through them. Some photos internally as well. Yes, Mr. Chairman, and that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maziwa. Before we go on to hear a little bit from Mr. Paul Goddard on the highways aspects, and there are a few of those, could Mrs. Armour, could you just explain what the significance, if any, is of this third-party request for call-in by Secretary of State, and the other remark right at the outset of Mr. Maziwa's presentation, where he talked about the change in the recommendation? Just a little bit of legal explanation on what has happened there, both only today, I believe.
Yeah, so as far as I understand it, is Sports England have withdrawn their objection. So had the objection remained, we would have had to have consulted the Secretary of State before issuing a decision. So we no longer have to do that. However, a third party has also contacted the Secretary of State. So I understand the Development Control Manager has indicated a decision will not be issued until we hear what the Secretary of State proposes to do, i.e. if they propose to call it in, or if they just propose to let the council make the decision.
Are we allowed, or do we need to know who that third party is?
I'm not sure it's necessarily relevant. I don't think it's necessarily relevant, but
relevant to tonight anyway. We may know in due course, but
yes.
not.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I've got no objection if, yeah.
Thank you. Members, I apologise for omitting to outline the procedure. I think I did that last time, but I will return to that when we've heard from Mr. Goddard outlining this particular application. I'll explain what then happens for the benefit of the public in particular. Mr. Goddard.
Good evening, members. This follows from previous planning applications that were looked at quite extensively with regards to highways, particularly parking accumulation. With the planning applications that were submitted in 2018, there were extensive surveys of the use of the car park, and the results concluded that the uses, mainly off-peak uses, which is the proposal before you, there will be sufficient car parking available off-peak when there's not a lot of employment or public town centre car parking in use. These uses before you would mainly be in the evenings and at weekends. And also on that basis, there's no objection on traffic grounds because any traffic generation is mainly off-peak. There is an existing car park there which is being revitalised and reused for this proposal before you. Otherwise, no objection from highways to this proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. For the benefit of members of the public, what the process is now, having heard, and this will be for each application on this evening's agenda, having heard from the officers presenting, we then go through a series of representations from each of the following groups where representatives have indicated that they wish to speak. Firstly, the parish or town council, then the objectors, then the supporters, then the applicant and or agent, and finally the district ward member. Of course, not in every case is there a representation, but that's the order that we will hear if there is. I see your hand, Councillor Barnett.
Chairman, members, I looked on the update sheet and quite clearly there's no parish representative tonight presenting the case. Having inquired, it's clear there's been an issue regarding the information from the town council to the officers here before 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. Now, my understanding is that there was a representative ready to speak. That representative had indicated he was going to speak on behalf of the town council, and the officer from the town council that was obliged to notify the officers at West Berks Council was not present. I gather he's on leave. Now, obviously it puts us members in a difficult position. And I do know for a fact that even at the site meeting last week, we did have discussions about who would be speaking, because I know that the objectors were having a discussion. But I've actually gone back on my records and I checked in 2014 when I was the chairman of the Planning and Highways and Newbury Town Council in 2014 period. Dr. Paul Bryant was the chairman, of course, Western area, and I was in a very difficult position. And I think Councillor Cole might well remember the event because you were on the committee at that time. And I actually came, and it was clear that the officer at the time for Newbury Town Council, a different officer I might add, had not notified because they were not available to notify before 4 o'clock on the afternoon of the Tuesday prior to the meeting. So I'm going to ask, and I don't know whether this is out of order, members, but I'm going to ask for transparency. And clearly the town council have got a lot of vested interest in this site and clearly have been involved in a lot of discussions. Would it be possible to suspend standing orders to allow the Newbury Town representative to speak tonight?
Chairman, Mr. Zama will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we can, if a majority of the committee wish, suspend standing orders. You've heard the case put by Councillor Barnett, and I can confirm that, in fact, I was at the Planning and Highways meeting where it was decided who would be the representative, and I think it's fallen between a new town council clerk and a relatively new councillor to get the relevant letter in. So, members, would anybody other? Yes, you would. You're seconding a motion, are you?
No,
can I have those in favour of suspending a standing
Chairman,
order so we can hear?
Chairman, I'd just like to make a statement first before
Okay, Councillor Cole
is taken. Councillor Barnett is correct that there have been exceptions to the rule of people having to notify us with regard to speaking at planning committees, but it is an exception. And if we do agree to do this evening, I think we've got to make it really apparent that this is an exceptional circumstance, because otherwise we will have similar occurrences at every planning committee meeting where we do tell applicants, agents and representatives that they do have to tell us by 4 o'clock on the day previously to the committee that if they're going to speak. Now, I understand the confusion that has occurred here, and I understand, because of the sensitivity of this application, that we should make an exception. But I just want to say very strongly that this, if we do agree to this, it is an exception, because what we do not want is that every planning committee meeting, people who have forgotten for whatever reason to put in their application to speak, to be allowed to speak, because that absolutely makes a mockery of the process.
Thank you for that contribution. I do agree that we have to have an exceptional reason, and the exceptions are we're in COVID. All sorts of parish and town councils have had problems with their internal communications. And we also had the situation where there was no chair or vice chair supervising the site visits. Councillor Abbs, yes.
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate Councillor Cole's input as always. Just to suffice to say, if we were to take that kind of stringent path, then the information provided to us on the update sheet we shouldn't even be thinking about in terms of the Sport England. So we can't
that's a
have
different
one rule for
matter.
one and
We'll
one
come
for-
to. But can we perhaps move to the vote on that? I think just to save taking an awful lot of time deciding whether to have a vote on it. I think this is an exceptional case for the reasons I've outlined, but it is also a matter of extremely high public interest, and I don't think it would look good to for either council, district or town, if we were to somehow manage to deny the town a voice in this meeting. The vote proposed, motion to suspend standing orders for that purpose, proposed by Councillor Barnett, seconded by Councillor Abbs. Can I show of hands of those in favour? Those against? None. That's carried. So you are the next in line. Is everything in order on the lectern? I think is that correct? That Councillor Miller moves with a mask on to the lectern, takes his mask off, and gives us 5 minutes from the Town Council. Thank you.
Thank you.
When you're ready, I will ask Mr. Oliver to give us a 1 minute warning when your time is closing towards the 5 minutes.
Before the clock starts, can I just say you can have the read 5 minutes. Would councillors like copies of the speech?
I think afterwards they will just have to take careful notes of what you say. No.
Thank you. Ready?
Can we start the clock? Go.
The application is to significantly change the use of a community leisure facility. As such, it should demonstrate benefit to the community, that it meets a community need, and that it is compliant with policy. I will address these and also the key arguments under the planning balance and conclusion section. Benefits. The application does not demonstrate any clear benefits. Community benefit. There will be a loss of a first-class football pitch against which the bar is extremely high to demonstrate any benefit regarding the pitch. The proposal is to replace the football pitch with a recreational area which will have no markings or goalposts. To be clear for members, this will not be a mugger, so no benefit to the community. Financial benefit. Demolishing the clubhouse and changing facilities would save the applicant approximately 17k over the next 3 years, yet will cost the applicant 191k to do so. There may be some income from parking charges, but it's not proven that this will be sufficient to prevent significant loss over the cost of the project. Since this is public money and there will be no demonstrable economic benefit and no public benefit, this cannot be justified and makes it more likely that the application, if approved today, would be ripe for appeal. Need. The applicant does not meet any need. It is not demonstrated there's any need for another recreational area in that part of the town. This is well catered for by Victoria Park and Fineman's Field. It is not demonstrated any need for extra surface parking. The existing parking on the site is not fully used and therefore cannot demonstrate the need for 80 further parking spaces. Sorry. A new multi-storey car park is going up at the station with hundreds of spaces. Playing pitch strategy states that there's very low level of football provision across the area that is secured for long-term community use, only 24%. This demonstrates a clear need for more pitches for organised football, not general recreation. And this application does not go any way towards meeting that need. Policies. This application flies against the council's own policies. According to policy ADPP2, as quoted in the report, existing community facilities will be protected and where appropriate, enhanced. This proposal neither protects nor enhances the existing facility. Playing pitch strategy also states that Sport England policy exception 4 applies, namely a replacement facility should be operational prior to the commencement of development. At the site visit last week, the planning officer confirmed that the application does constitute development. It is clear that no development is allowable on this site until a replacement facility is operational. Finally, I'd like to address the planning balance and conclusion section 7.3. The proposal will in no way provide continued provision of a community leisure facility. The current leisure facility the area provides is as a football ground. Therefore, it's completely wrong to suggest that these plans will provide continued provision of a community leisure facility, and this argument and the significant weight given to it should be dismissed. Officers consider that the benefits of bringing the site back into a community use clearly outweighs the continued non-use of the site. I quote, "We would not dispute that the continued non-use of the site is a bad thing. However, this application is the wrong proposal to address the issue. The site is clearly not being brought back into community use. Converting the football pitch to a general recreation area where organised football can no longer be played in a location that is not one the general public would go to does not fit this description. Therefore, this argument should also be dismissed and not considered in favour of this proposal. So in conclusion, 1, the proposal demonstrates neither financial nor community benefits. 2, it does not demonstrate that it meets any community need. 3, it goes against the council's own policies. 4, it's very likely to open the council to the prospect of being taken to appeal and therefore could subject the council to risk of further unacceptable costs. Finally, since there's a clear conflict of interest in the council's land
1 minute.
owner and as planning authority, the public has the right to assume that no committee member voting this evening will play any part in whatever body or committee is set up to administer the site as a landlord. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. You're well within your time. Any questions, Councillor Miller? Councillor Culver.
Oh, sorry, no, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a very basic question. Whereabouts is Fireman's Field? I haven't been able to find it on a map.
It's just off.
Right.
It's in Greenham.
Right, thank you.
Oh, that one, yes. Yeah. That's all. That was your only question. Any other questions to the Town Council? Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Miller, just to make sure I've understood everything you've been saying correctly, I have down here things like no benefit, loss of pitch, no need for it. I am a little fuzzy, I suppose, on the community leisure facility definition versus recreational facility. Are you able to expand on that for me as to the exact difference between the two?
I'm not. I'm taking a comparison with the current community. It says
Okay.
current continued provision of a community leisure facility.
Okay, well, I can come back to ask an officer later for that. Thank you very much. But to summarise, my understanding of Newbury Town Council's position is that this is an inappropriate development. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Cole.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I notice on the in the report that Newbury Town Council is objecting in agreement with Sport England. Now that Sport England have withdrawn their objection, what's Newbury Town Council's position?
So the Town Council is objecting in agreement with Sport England's objections that were there, but also in line with Newbury Town Council's strategy. If you wish, but
I have a question. You referred to a risk of appeal. Could you explain how there's a risk of appeal arising out of this application in that, it's only the applicant that can appeal against refusal?
I think it's a very element involving the loss of a football pitch, a football ground, permanent loss of that football ground, and on grounds which are dubious. I've said there's no financial benefit, there's no community benefit, and aside from other planning, there are grounds for calling this in, as it were, and it sounds like it's already been called in on other grounds.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. I will perhaps ask for officers to explain if there are any grounds for appeal later on. That's your answer anyway. The next speaker we hear from is, oh, you have a question? Sorry, I couldn't see another hand up.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman. It's about the fact that it's an asset of community value. I don't know whether that's registered under the name of the Town Council or West Berks Council. Is it your understanding that just the ground is an asset of community value, or are the associated facilities also part of that asset? And what comment would you make on 6.12, where it says that there have been vandals and potential salvage hunters? Who should have been looking after the site if it's an asset of community value, and making sure that that doesn't happen to that site? Are you able to comment on that?
Yes, an ACV is on all of the facilities. And the current ACV is facilitated by the Newbury Community Football Group. An application by Newbury Town Council has been submitted to. That application went in last week, I believe. The ACV does give planning chair hope, and I think others have more knowledge about that than me, but it does give us sort of hope of on the point.
Vandalism.
Who should have been looking after it? Yeah.
Okay, I think we're done with Councillor Miller. Thank you very much. Objectors now. We have 2 objectors registered, and let me just remind myself. It's Mr. McDougall, I can see, and Mr. Pearce. And you have 5 minutes between you to share the time. How are you going to manage that? And we will assist you with the timing if you can tell us how many minutes you each want.
Yeah, if I can just, I was going to clarify that. So I think the representative for Mr. Pearce is on Zoom. So I've just got a very short bit. So I'll stop it if you can stop the clock, and then we can restart when Mr. Pearce is represented. Less than 90 seconds. Less than 90 seconds, unless I get carried away. So I'm trying to allocate most of the time to the person. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of focus on the point that we're talking about the creation of an open space. Really, this application is about the removal of an existing grass football pitch. I just wanted everyone to be really clear on that. So we're not creating a sports facility. We're not creating a mugger or a sports pitch. There's no pitch markings, there's no goal, there's no toilets, there's no fencing, there's no way of booking it. So what we're actually doing and voting on here is to remove a grass football pitch that's been in use since 1963. And if you think about the shortage of playing pitches across West Berkshire, which the playing pitch strategy outlines, are going to be here for over 3 years, why on earth would you remove an existing grass football pitch from use based in the centre of the town? Effectively, you're banning organised football from an existing grass football pitch. Thank you.
Chair, if you can hear me, there is no sound from the council.
So Les Durrant, are you there?
Thank you.
Right.
I didn't hear anything for the last 30 seconds because someone cut the sound off completely.
You have 4 minutes and 15 seconds of the time allocated to objectors. So when you're ready, we will start the clock for those 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Okay? We can hear you.
Okay. My concern is that there are serious deficiencies with this application, which is why I am the author of the letter to the Secretary of State. The applicants openly stated their intentions to use this pitch facility just referred to on a temporary basis. The truth is there's a long-term development scheme in prospect here, which is leading to the unjustified loss of the football ground without the provision of an equal or better facility being in place before it's taken away. Sports England may have withdrawn their objection, but there are still conflicts here with council policy and with MPPF. And based on the information available, the replacement facility is clearly not going to be available, as the officer's report says, by spring next year. There's no design on the information available. It's not been the subject of planning application, no community consultation on that proposal. So in fact, it's not likely to happen anytime soon. At best, it's unsuitable to demolish the existing facility effectively and take it away. Particular concern I have is over environmental impact assessment. I believe the officer report to be completely wrong and misguided. This proposal is part of a very large development project, namely the redevelopment of London Road Industrial Estate. That, without doubt, is EIA development. This is part of a cumulative impact. This proposal should have been the subject of EIA, including flood risk assessment, which it was not. So I believe the officer report is totally defective in those particular areas. The letter, which you members obviously can get in its full text, deals with all the issues involved here. The policy position is very, very clear. This proposal is contrary to policy. The development brief and master plan for the redevelopment of LRIE does not feature in the adopted development plan, nor does it feature at the moment, even as part of the emerging plan. Even your own consultants have told you when the brief was taken to executive that it's not policy compliant. So you're taking this application forward with all those defects in the officer report and the consultation programme. Our belief is this matter really quite rightly should be referred to the Secretary of State, and we have offered for the NCFG proposed application, still undetermined, to be called in as well, so they can all be considered on an objective basis, preferably at a public inquiry. It is an asset of community value, and it's too good to lose, as you've heard. The letter that has been sent to the Secretary of State, I must stress, does not rely on Sport England's objection. It gives many, many reasons, which I've referred to already, in terms of particularly environmental impact assessment, non-compliance with national planning policy, non-compliance with your own policy, and the applicant in this particular case does happen to be the council, and the objective ultimately is a major development proposal. This should be looked at objectively by the Secretary of State, and that is the reason we have asked the Secretary of State.
You have 1 minute left, Mr. Durrance. I hope you heard that.
I did. It gives me a little bit more time, having told you the broad outline, just to go back and say that there are a number of very detailed issues here that cause concern, which are related obviously to the use of the facility by the community group at the present time and what they're trying to achieve. This is far more in line with the council's adopted and emerging planning policy than this particular proposal. And I think it can only be said that I believe the reasons relating in particular to the deficiencies to screen this application properly as to whether or not it constitutes EIA development is sufficient grounds in its own right for the Secretary of State to intervene. And I would respectfully ask the committee this evening for the interest of transparency and fairness to the community who have been promoting the retention of this facility.
Time's up. Could you bring your remarks to the end?
Decision tonight. Thank you.
It's pretty well timed. Members, to Durrance or to Mr. McDougall. Councillor Abbs.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Durrance.
Good evening.
Would you mind helping me slightly? You referred to the policies that are being broken, the council's policy. Could you list some of those for me, please?
Yes. The existing core strategy policies are being ignored. CS8 and 9 are all policies which, one way and the other, this particular proposal runs in conflict with. And then there are a number of other more detailed policies on the local area basis, which talk about the retention and enhancement of such facilities. The area delivery plan policy 2 for Newbury, for example.
So in summary, I've got 3 at the moment. You mentioned others, but you didn't give me numbers. So the MPPF, CS8 and CS9 are the main ones that you're saying that we would be contravening.
I mean, these are the adopted core strategy policies. I mean, there are, as I said in my talk to the committee, there are, of course, aspects of national planning policy which I think are not being adhered to either.
Thank you very much.
Any other? Oh yes, Councillor Culver, I've seen your virtual hand as well. I'm looking there.
Thank you, Chairman. A question for Mr McDougall. What do you think the likelihood is that if this planning application goes through, that pitch will actually be used for 11-a-side football?
That will be zero because it's impossible to book. It's not marked. There's no goal. So I think, as it's said in one of Councillor McKinnon's early statements, it will be used for dog walking predominantly.
Thank you.
I see no other hands. Thank you, gentlemen. Mr McDougall, Mr Durrant.
Chair, if I might just say one thing.
Speakers, the applicant, Mr Bill Bagnall, who is going to join us on Zoom. Are you there, Mr Bagnall?
Should be just coming through, Chairman.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair. Can you see me or hear me?
Yes, let me hear you. Yes, I can see you as well. When you're ready, you know the form. 5 minutes starting now.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair, committee members. I'm not going to speak for the full 5 minutes. I'll just summarise again the main points already made. I am, for those who don't know me, and the members of the public, I'm Bill Bagnall, Manager of Special Projects for West Berkshire Council's Economic Development Team, and where in respect to this application, I am acting as agent for the council, primarily as a landowner and an asset owner. Generally, as you heard, the application proposes the demolition of the old football clubhouse, turnstiles, porter cabin, lavatory block, and the temporary reopening of the old grass pitch with new boundary treatments and appropriate signage for public use, and the provision of new pay and display parking spaces. In respect to the clubhouse, it is beyond economic repair and has been so since 2018, when the last tenant left. And the clubhouse is both a cost and health and safety liability, despite reasonable security measures. The building can never again be used by anyone, and where there is no satisfactory reason for retaining it at cost to the council. The application also proposes, as you know, the reopening of the old grass pitch for general public enjoyment or recreational sport, which, until the area is made fit for use, should remain closed. The application also provides for extra pay and display parking on existing areas of hard standing, and which will provide helpful income to both support the temporary facility and income to the council generally. It is very important to see this application in the wider context of the council's well-known aspiration to redevelop the London Road industrial estate, and where this application, as said by others, is the first in a series of applications, the process of which has been subject to considerable consultation with Sport England, and where, as already said, Sport England have formally confirmed they have no objections to the proposals contained in this application. Chairman, that's all I'm going to say. I thank you and the committee for your time, and I hope you will look upon the application favourably. Good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Bagnall. You've used less than half the allocated time. Councillor Culver, I've got you first, followed by Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr Bagnall. You'll recall that I asked Mr Miller a question earlier about the asset of community value and who is responsible for looking after it. And he said, as far as he's aware, it's the landlord. Do you agree with that? And what comment would you have on the fact that the landlord hasn't been looking after that asset of community value?
I agree that the council is the landlord and is reasonably responsible for looking after assets to an appropriate level according to the condition of the asset. You will be aware that the clubhouse was condition surveyed in July 2018, and where immediate reoccupation would require £200,000 worth of work. By the following year, another 100,000, and a total by year 5 of 500,000 for a building which would cost to replace new at the time in 2018 between 900,000 and £1 million. And so I think it is fair to say the building was not worth protecting from an asset value point of view, that it was very necessary to keep the building secure and closed, to try and reasonably prevent people breaking in, and in that process being seriously injured and thereby possibly exposing the council to a serious liability issue. We have done the best we can with 24-hour metal sheet security to keep the place closed. We've even had to metal sheet security the roof in places where, having put the metal sheeting around the entire outside elevations, it was then broken in via the roof lights. So yes, we are responsible, but I do not agree that we have let a valuable asset deteriorate unnecessarily. We have simply kept it secure to prevent unauthorized access where there is no building asset value.
Thank you.
Councillor Abbs and then Councillor Barnett.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Mr. Bagnall, you say Sport England has withdrawn their objection. Does that mean they're actively supporting this demolition then?
Sport England are not objecting because they see this application in the wider context of what we're proposing to deliver at Monks Lane as a replacement football facility. So it is not just simply they are now supporting this application. They don't object to it because they have confidence in what we're proposing to do elsewhere to re-provide for football. And as a result, they don't object to this proposal.
Sorry, I thought my question was, are they supporting this application? Why have we suddenly got an echo?
Oh, I apologize. I haven't actually seen anything saying they support it, but I have seen formal confirmation that they have no objections whatsoever.
Does that mean, in your opinion, therefore, Sport England's standing objections would not apply, that i.e. that the sport ground must be available as a replacement sport ground? Is that just because they haven't objected, they're certainly not supporting, does that mean their standard rules not apply?
Their current position is predicated on the basis that the council is committed to re-providing what we believe is a better facility at Monks Lane with long-term sustainability and security of tenure.
So can you share the minutes of the meetings with us, or exact timeline of the discussions that went on and the promises that were made on the actual delivery of a new facility? Because certainly as a member of Western Area Planning, I've not seen anything come anywhere near us yet. So I'm struggling to understand if someone's guaranteeing me, yeah, we're going to have a pitch tomorrow, then I might withdraw my application. But if there's nothing coming, or that information is incorrect, then the objection may well come back in a few months.
I'm not able to confirm the exact timeline, but I believe the case officer can confirm that recent correspondence between Sport England and the council is now publicly available.
That is correct. Thank you, Mr. Bagnall. That is in our update sheet and therefore publicly available, the full timeline.
Chairman, which update sheet is that exactly?
The one that came out this afternoon.
At what time, please?
I think it was actually sent at 3:15. I didn't read it for 3/4 of an hour.
So 3 hours before this meeting, which is absolutely abysmal in terms of process.
Well, we will raise that
Cole,
later, but that's the way update sheets have actually been issued for many years, rightly or wrongly. Councillor Doherty. Oh, sorry. Councillor Barnett.
Well, Chairman, I just want a bit of guidance because we've obviously moved on from Mr. Goddard's presentation, and I did have a
yes, it's questions to questions to the applicant.
Happy taking a question in relationship to the hard standing. Is Mr. Bagnall, are you happy having a question which relates to hard standing issues?
Yeah, yes, of course, please.
Right, okay. One thing that I was quite concerned about on the site visit was the unevenness and obstruction of various different metals of various kinds protruding. I did have some assurance that all this would be cleaned up and smoothed off. Is the hard standing going to be asphalted, or is it just going to be made good?
The plan is to, where you have areas of considerable tarmac fail, that will be replaced new, and I suspect it'll be the majority of it. And where, as you rightly pointed out, you have the old concrete hard standing for the former stand, you have, amongst other things, coming out of the ground, the old bolt fixings, which, as you point out, are very dangerous. And so all of that surface will have to be broken out, taken away, and then relayed to tarmac new.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty now.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Bagnall, can you confirm, or can you give us, in your view, is there a public benefit to the removal of a clubhouse on health and safety grounds?
Yes, it's very, very simple. Imagine a scenario like this. We do the best we can to keep the building secure, and then someone breaks in, for someone, for example, a rough sleeper. We wish the world was a better place, and that wasn't going to happen. And someone was determined to get in and then was asleep, possibly through substance abuse, and then the place is set fire to by vandals. We have had an instance of arson at the clubhouse, where one of the adjacent porter cabins was set fire to, and the police were involved and the fire and rescue. And so, to be frank, do I lie awake worrying about it? Yes, I do. So from a health and safety point of view, all arguments aside, I personally want that building down as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Bagnall. And I actually got another follow-up question, if I may, Chair.
Do carry on, yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Bagnall, is there a public benefit to the green open space, to the remaining grass pitch? Is there a public benefit in terms of physical health for that particular area?
Well, in a very general sense, yes. You know, the area will be, I hear what everyone has said, it will no longer be the best facility for organised football matches. But then if you were to have a facility like that, you would have ideally an entirely exclusive closed ground, and which, yes, would be used by football teams, but it wouldn't be available to all people. And health and well-being can be manifested in both taking recreational sport activities, or, as someone has mentioned, walking your dog. And so in the wider sense, yes, there is a health benefit to that area. The alternative is we have an extremely run-down area which is left closed until the land is potentially needed for redevelopment, subject to any consent we might achieve. So I would agree there is a health benefit.
Thank you. I have a question, if I may, from the chair. You introduced yourself, Mr. Bagnall, as the landlord. It's quite unusual for an applicant to come before this committee without somebody who can speak for all the planning aspects. This is, after all, a planning committee. Can you advise us on how the applicant, in your case, has been taking planning advice? There was advice, of course, available through Avison Young, but apart from that, how do you get your planning advice in taking this application forward?
I obviously have a certain amount of experience myself, but I also reasonably have to be guided by planning, and where policy has, we believe, been fully adhered to. And of course, this is not just a snapshot in time based on this one application. As we said earlier on, and as Mr. Durrant agreed, this is the first relevant application in a series that is working towards, hopefully, an outline application on the London Road Industrial Estate. So I've taken advice not only in the context of this application on its own, including issues like asset of community value, the reprovision of sport. I've also had to look further to the future because, as I think everyone realises, this is an extremely complex process, but where we believe at each stage we're doing the right thing.
Thank you. I have Councillor Abbs with another question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mr. Mag, a couple of things. Obviously, you're down as a manager, special projects. Do you have qualifications in health and mental health and so on? Or is that just a layman's opinion that you're offering?
No, I think that's it's a fair question. I believe I was asked that as a layman, and I gave it as a layperson.
That's fine. I just wanted to understand if there was some sort of substance behind that. You just mentioned about this is one in a series of applications to come forward. How do you align that with the EIA comment that Mr. Durrant made earlier?
That is a good question, and I'm glad that's been brought up. I don't want to have a one-to-one tussle with Mr. Durrant by this means, but the first hurdle to get over in looking at how to regenerate the London Road Industrial Estate is you review, is it commercially viable, all other issues aside? And the Addison Young report is primarily a document to look at commercial viability. We've got over that first hurdle. I mean, the world could change again. Very sadly, the economy might go in the wrong direction, and the position that Addison Young has given us, which at the moment is positive and viability continues to be in place, that may change, but we've got over that first hurdle. And the proposals are very high level. It shows potential development blocks, whether it be offices or residential. But as Mr. Durrant knows, the environmental impact assessment is an iterative process, a long and detailed one, which will eventually result in an environmental statement being attached as an incredibly important document to an outline application on the London Road Industrial Estate as a whole. Mr. Durrant, we are at the very beginning of that environmental investigative process. And some of those processes will be very straightforward. So, for example, there'll be desktop surveys on archaeology, there'll be desktop surveys on ecology, and some of those things will prove to be quite straightforward, and then we can move on. And some of those will be more challenging, like, as clearly you're alluding to, flooding, drainage, and another issue that's been raised, contamination. And so we're at the beginning of the process, high-level investigation, sort of desktop survey, including taking level measurements to make sure that the levels we see on site mirror the Environment Agency levels as related to the flood zone plans. Very important, because sometimes the Environment Agency says their plans are not up to date and they wish to amend them. And of course, that has huge significance between flood zones 1 and 2. So we're at that very early stage. And when you know some of the impacts, that then, as you know, Mr. Durrant, informs how design.
Excuse me,
Mr. Bagnall,
we are not having a discussion between yourself and Mr. Durrant. You're answering the question of Councillor Abbs.
Okay,
and you're
sorry,
going into
I
too much
apologise.
detail.
I apologise.
It's interesting to know that you've got all these detailed things going around in your head, keeping you awake at night, I'm sure. But I think you've answered Councillor Abbs' question. Is that right?
If I may, Chairman,
yes.
You mentioned Addison Young's statement there. Exactly when did that report come to us? Do you remember the date?
I believe from memory it became public towards the end of November 2019.
So before COVID hit. So,
yes.
So is there just as much risk of that report being completely out of date and has a high risk associated with it? Would you agree?
That's a fair comment.
I think we're straying off this particular application. We're not here to have a whole debate on the LRIE, although understandably I'm as keen as everybody else to get on to the big battle, if you like, on that big application. We're talking about the demolition. All right.
Mr. Bagnall has brought in a direct statement that links into all of the other to come, and the risk and the what he's presenting is it's okay that we made a start. There's just as good a chance of it all failing, and therefore having not done the IA up front leads us in a worse position. But we can debate on that later.
I hear what you say, but I think we can deal with our own officers when we question the officers later. I think it'd be better than dealing with the applicant, because it's planning, and Mr. Bagnall has admitted he's not a planner.
I'm just seeking clarification from him.
Okay. Councillor Cole?
Yeah, Chairman, just to confirm what you have said, Mr. Bagnall is presenting as the council, as the landowner, not as the local planning authority. This is not a planning application. He's not presenting as a as the planning authority. He is presenting as the council, as a landowner, and members should be aware, if they're not, that there is a distinct Chinese wall between the council as a landowner and the council as a local planning authority. And I think it is unfair to bring in and challenge Mr. Bagnall on issues which are to do with the council as the local planning authority when he is representing the council as a landowner. And I think that we should not even consider debating anything to do with any future planning or development at London Road Industrial Estate as a local planning authority, because this committee may indeed be prejudicing itself if we stray into that territory. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. The purpose of my own question actually was to seek how an applicant, like any applicant, was obtaining independent planning advice. And it's a particularly difficult situation when that applicant has this Chinese wall situation with his own local planning authority. I didn't really get an answer, but it is a problem that I think we're all aware of, and I wanted us to be aware of that. Mrs. Armour, can you help us on this?
Yes, sorry, I just wanted to say, I think it might be very helpful if the planning officer sort of restates what this application is for before we go to the debate, because I think that will help everyone to focus their minds on what the debate should be about.
Thank you for that. I agree with that. Thank you for that advice. Right, we are now up to the ward members. We have 2 ward members, Councillor Jeff Cant in the room.
Sorry, can I interject as a member of the public and as a councillor? A serious misleading of the public and the committee has just been made by that officer, and I just need to point that out.
I can't accept that, Councillor Miller. We're here to listen to our officers. We, this district council, take advice from our officers. If you have a problem with that, could you take it up outside the meeting? I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not sure you're qualified to actually say what our legal officer's advice is, whether it's right or wrong.
Okay. I want to make that point.
Chairman,
we're not going to hear you anymore, Councillor Miller.
This nonsense needs to stop.
Sorry.
Yes.
And I think if Mr. Miller can't obey, for the want of better words, the rules of this committee, should be escorted out of this chamber.
Well, I think if he does intervene again, I'm afraid that will have to be the case. Thank you. Yes, we were going to move on to ward members.
Chair, going back to the business in hand.
Yes.
Forgive me, you refer to the fact as the ward member's opportunity to make a statement on behalf of the ward. It's a 2-member ward, and I would like to defer, if I can, to Councillor Jeff Beck to make that statement on behalf of the ward.
I won't count that introduction as part of the time, because you're really just introducing Councillor Beck, who will zoom in and give the 5 minutes worth. Understood. Are you there? Yes, I can see you. When you're ready, Councillor Beck.
You're muted.
Can't hear you. You're
Beck.
muted. Start again. Still can't hear you. I will start the clock when we start to be able to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman and members. Like many of you, I have been lobbying quite extensively on this application. In recent times, I've held a number of conversations with Howard Woollaston, the portfolio holder for who has been active.
I think you're hitting the button too often, Councillor Beck. We'll give you the time to sort out the technology.
Okay. Roger. Can you hear me now?
We think it's a poor connection. I heard you saying, "Can we hear you?" And yes, we could, but try once more. Otherwise, you might have to phone in. Would that be something you can manage?
I'll try anyway. I'll try again then. Apologies for this. Chairman, members, good evening. I too have been lobbied extensively on this application. In recent times, I've held a number of conversations with Howard.
Chairman, it sounds as if he's away from the microphone, doesn't it?
Can you get closer to the microphone? It's very faint, but I think you're coming through.
Can you hear me now?
It's much better.
Okay, I'll start again. Chairman, members, good evening. I have been lobbied extensively on this application. In recent times, I've held a number of conversations with Howard Wollaston, the portfolio holder for leisure. In principle, there would appear to be no reason why Newbury Community Football Group should not be able to use of this proposed facility. This would, of course, need for the establishment of a working arrangement or a modus operandus, will do what you may, with West Berkshire Council to cover, for example, the Newbury Group bringing in portable goalposts and possibly carrying out any essential temporary pitch marking. I have in mind the autumn and winter sort of periods, in particular late afternoons and evenings, when the general public are far less likely to wish to use this facility. Pitch lighting exists. I understand from Bill Bagnall that there's no current proposal to either remove the lighting or to utilise same. And I say to you all this evening, why not? If the Newbury Community Football Group are prepared to pay the running costs, let them have the use of same, by arrangement, obviously. I see the reason stated for not providing toilet facilities. I would ask you that you do not close the door entirely to this. Whilst I fully recognise the running costs and the potential for vandalism, please keep this door open, even if it's a toilet door. Think of a mother with 2 young children. It could be a very, very distressing period of minutes before she reaches the existing public toilets mentioned in the papers. You will cater from the foregoing that I am in favour of this application, providing there is a genuine cooperation with the Newbury Community Football Group going forward. That would obviously be between officers, and I'm sure that that can be achieved to the benefit of all concerned. Thank you for hearing me this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Beck. Are there any members wishing to put any questions to Councillor Beck? Yes, Councillor Abbs.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Councillor Beck. Obviously, you made a statement about we should be able to use the facilities, and then went on to describe temporary markings and goalposts, etc. Do you recall on the site visit where the officers talked about removing the high fencing around the facility and replacing it with very low fencing, and therefore making it unsuitable to be used as a football ground, or impossible to use, I think was the word that was used on site?
We can't hear your answer, Councillor Beck. You seem to have muted again, or you're too far from the microphone.
I do recall that being mentioned. However, I do not consider that to be something which cannot be overcome. Presumably, you're thinking about balls sort of being kicked from the pitch into neighbouring properties. Is that correct?
We missed half of your answer. Could you repeat the answer, Councillor Beck?
Sorry about this. Yes, I do recall the discussion.
No, it's not where I can. It's impossible.
I did hear the discussion about the fencing, and I do not consider that be overcome by goodwill on all.
I think we got the gist of it. Thank you. Any other questions? No. That ends the presentations, members. We now, I think we'll take up Mrs. Armour's suggestion that the planning officer, case officer, could repeat for our benefit what it is we are discussing, because we have strayed into the wider area of the LRIE. And I understand that it is difficult to separate this out because this application is the first of many, as we can see from the timeline that came out in the update sheet. But we're only dealing with, well, I won't take the words out of Mr. Masiwa's mouth. Mr. Masiwa, or one of the other planners, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the application is for full planning permission for the creation of an open space for public recreation, including the demolition of the former football ground clubhouse and the delivery of new parking spaces, erection of timber bollards and new fencing. That's the description in full, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Masiwa. Now it's this time where we ask officers questions, and I will leap in first, Chairman's prerogative here. Can you confirm what I've taken so far from reading the reports and listening to everything, is that there's nothing in this application that would prevent the other application by the Newbury Community Football Group, should it be approved, from going ahead? Nothing in planning terms, that is. There is, of course, the landlord having to allow it to happen, nor is there anything to prevent the applicant proceeding with their long chain of applications should we refuse this application. So it doesn't really matter which way this goes. Could you confirm that that seems to be my view anyway?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I think you're correct. If members are minded to approve this application, when the Newbury Community Football Group applications come in, or once the considerations are complete, the local planning authorities can recommend approval for those applications as well. And it's up to the landowner and the applicants to reach an agreement in terms of what proposal is implemented on the site. So in terms of the considerations, we consider each application on its own individual merits and provide the recommendation for the committee. If this application is refused, yes, it won't stop any future application for the wider London Road Industrial Estate. But as we've established, obviously, this is an application on its own. It's not linked to the London Road Industrial Estate. It's being considered based on its own individual merits. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Masiwa. Other members, any points? Thank you, Councillor Cole.
Yeah, thank you. This is just a question, Ms. Masiwa. How much weight is being given to the new policies in the emerging local plan, which may have a different emphasis to our current policies? Because the local plan has passed Reg 18 and is heading towards Reg 19. Are you applying weight to emerging policies?
We've considered the application based on the current development plan. There are specific policies, which is the core strategy CS18, which directly affects or influences the proposal, and also the council's playing pitch strategy, which is a material consideration in considering this application. In terms of the emerging policies, we have awarded them limited weight because they haven't gone through the adoption and examination stage. Obviously, the policies that I've referred to and are in the report have gone through that. And as I indicated, they are directly relevant to the proposal being considered this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Cole.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Mr. Masiwa, I want to ask a couple of questions, if that's okay. First, relating to paragraph 6.21. My understanding from this is that one of our officers has written a statement of intent about our intentions regarding Monks Road. And I just wondered, it seems a bit sort of the wrong way round, really. Should we not be dealing with that application first to ensure that we have a replacement pitch before we go ahead with this application? And would we, it says here that usually in policy terms, you would deal with it that way round. So would we, if we had another developer come to us, would we simply accept a statement of intent about what they were intending to do in lieu of them actually meeting policy requirements? And the second question I wanted to ask was regarding the email that Sports England sent to you yesterday. They say if there is going to be a committee, could we let them know? So it seems from that email to you that they don't even know we're having a committee tonight. Is that true? Thank you.
Mr. Massey, we can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Okay, my apologies for that. Thank you, Councillor. On the first point, as you may be aware, Sport England did raise an objection on the application, and that was centered around the playing pitch strategy requirement that there is no development on the site we are considering tonight prior to the replacement facility having been in operation. As indicated in Sport England's comments, there is no loss of a playing field on this site, and this is quite important in their as well as in their withdrawal of the objection, because the playing field is being retained and is not being developed. It may be developed in the future, in which case its loss will be engaged. At this particular moment, it's not being engaged. On the second point, regarding Sport England and their email, I can confirm that we have sent the committee report and the update sheet to Sport England today, and we intend to notify them of the outcome of the meeting as they have requested. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Not regarding whether a private developer would be treated in the same way, no change.
Exactly. Can we hear an answer to that?
I think actually maybe it's best that I step in and answer that. The council is a responsible authority that publishes policy documents that formulate and set out its plans. Those plans include its plans for management of the community, management of the community's facilities. In that respect, we're a very different organisation as a council, and setting the divide between the local planning authority and the property facet of the council there. But we as a council have a responsibility to our public to publish public documents. Sport England's original comments on this required a public statement declaring the council's intent, their firm intent, to actually carry forward the plans for a replacement facility. Now, Sport England seem to misunderstand fundamentally that the playing pitch strategy is in and of itself, as an adopted policy document, a statement of intent, and carries significantly more weight than simply a statement would do in terms of delivering on the council's objectives. So I think in that respect, you can treat the council very differently from a private developer on this matter. Thank you, Chairman.
Is that a reasonable answer, Councillor Culver? Yeah, I think so. Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I note on page 25.2.1, and it talks about relevant planning history. I just want some clarification here, because there are three, well, there's many there, but there's two relevant to me, both starting with the number 20, which I assume they were submitted in 2020 originally, and then a second number and a bit on the end. In terms of the order in which these applications come in, did 20/01966/COMIND and 20/01530/out both come in before this application that we're considering this evening? Yes, no?
Who's answering that?
Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Zuma, right.
Yes, I'll just double check that before I answer that, if that's okay.
Okay, so Mr. Till will know the numbering system that we use for planning applications, Mr. Till. Surely it's easy enough to work out, right?
Councillor Abbs, the numbering system doesn't relate to when the application was validated. So an application could be submitted in March last year and only become valid yesterday.
Okay, then I'll change my question. In what order were they validated, please?
So in terms of the order, the Newbury Community Football Ground applications were submitted first. In terms of the numbering.
Right, no, I can see it's a lower number, so I kind of assumed that. I just wanted confirmation, but
I assume that the point of that question will come out in the debate.
Well, I think it's very relevant when we come to debate, to be honest. So thank you.
Any other questions from members? I have one other, if I may, and stop me if I'm out of order, because nobody else can stop me as I'm in the chair, Mrs. Armour. But I'm referring to your report where you allude to the economic benefits and the economic justification, for example, as para 612, and I think in the conclusions in para 72. Clearly, the LRIE, as we've heard from Mr. Bagnall, was all about economic viability and, in effect, the benefits to the applicant. But what are the economic benefits of this particular application that we should be weighing in our minds when we make a decision? Because it's not clear to me that they are significant. But I do note that this particular part of the LRIE, because it's the only part above the floodplain, is designated within the master plan as for the most high value element, i.e. the residential. Is that what we should be considering?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As indicated previously, I think we are focusing on this proposal in its own individual planning merits. In terms of economic aspects of this proposal, the benefits are limited. There are some benefits in terms of the parking for workers, visitors, and the income that's generated from that. But I think the main sort of benefits are around the contribution to the wider social aspects in terms of a community recreation facility, really, and opening up the facility for use by members of the public on a social basis.
Thank you. So it's not really economic, it's more social.
That's correct.
Looking at the application on its own and not in conjunction with what follows LRIE. Thank you. Did you want another question, Councillor Abbs?
Yeah, actually, yes, a question to yourself, Chairman, about are we in general asking officers in general questions at the moment? Or
well, we're asking questions of officers, yes. We haven't started the debate. Great, but obviously some of the questions and the answers will feed into the debate in a minute.
So I do have one for legal, if I may. The same question I asked about order, is there any weight or legal weight that should be associated with the order in which planning reviews applications?
I don't think there should be for this, because you're considering this one on its merits. I mean, you could well approve the other application. That there's nothing to stop you doing that. If you've got one approval on the site, there's nothing to stop you approving another one. Equally, you could refuse both items. They're to be considered separately. So I think the order they come in, I don't know what you're thinking of in terms of being relevant.
Well, the order in which things are validated appears to be the critical date, and I'm somewhat surprised that this is not a sequential type process, first in, first out. Some will require more looking at. If there's no legal support for that statement, that's fine. That's all I'm looking for. Is there anything we should be worried about in terms of opening ourselves up to not having reviewed them in the right order?
I don't think there is for your discussions tonight. I'm sure planning officers are probably justified. I don't think they've deliberately delayed, or as far as I'm
I wasn't
aware.
accusing anybody of deliberately.
Yeah,
just trying to get clarity.
No, I don't think there is for your debate tonight. I mean, if there are concerns of that nature, then obviously that's something you need to take up outside this meeting.
Sure.
Thank you, members. I think we've exhausted questions to the officers, so we can move into a debate. But I'd like to turn to Councillor Cant, who has, I think, a proposal that could shorten proceedings a bit if it's passed.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, we seem to have, understandably, as I've tracked this for a couple of years now, strayed across areas of the process, of the strategy, of the policy of the council, and all sorts of other issues relating to surrounding this planning application, as well as the application itself. And my sense of this at the moment is that it deserves a platform where it can be given a proper review within the total context of the council's strategy and policy. So my proposal, if I could find a seconder to this, would be that we note the debate we've had with interest and refer this application to the District Planning Committee for consideration within the broader context.
Before I ask whether that has a seconder, can I ask for Mrs. Armour's comment on the legality of that within the Constitution? I'm not sure this committee, or maybe it can. Could you advise us?
Yes, it can. Members of the Area Planning Committee can refer an item up to District Planning Committee. That's perfectly acceptable.
Just to be clear, Councillor Cant, this would be because of the importance to the applicant's strategy, i.e. the council strategy, let's be honest, that it should be determined by a district-wide committee. I'm slightly concerned that because this might set a precedent, but I'm sympathetic. What about other members? Councillor Abbs.
Having just listened to what Councillor Cant has said, as long as this application can then be reviewed within a wider context, I think this is a very good idea, because it should not be considered as standalone. There's too many interlocking things going on. So I would second that if we're able to.
Members, I have Councillor Culver. Do you wish to comment on this before I ask for a vote?
Thank you, Chairman. Surely it doesn't preclude us having our own debate and vote this evening, because if we were to refuse, then officers could refer it to district anyway, presumably. So why would we not also debate, bearing in mind we've just spent an hour and a half or so going through it, would we not want to take this opportunity to have a vote ourselves?
I think the concern also arises over the numbers of people on this Western Area Committee that happen to have conflicts of interest that we don't know whether they're going to feel able to vote. I think they've declared that they probably will. But that is at a district level, you could bring together a committee which doesn't have any executive members, nor does it have any Newbury Town Council members, if that was felt to be helpful in terms of the public perception of the transparency of the decision. That's my views. Councillor Cant, have you got
Forgive me, Chair. I think in terms of process, am I not right in saying that I put a proposal to the committee, and before moving on to any other proposals, such as further debate, I'm entitled to a vote on my proposal?
Yes, you are. It's just that Councillor Culver has raised a point which I think is quite easy for Mrs. Armour to confirm, that it would be possible for us to have a debate, refuse, and it would be possible for the normal process, which is the development manager to reference up the matter.
I think there's set grounds for the development control manager referencing it up, and I certainly don't know whether he would or not. So I think the matters that Councillor Cant has raised, I think are something, you need to consider. And I think it seems a justified reason to refer something up to the District Planning Committee. And as Councillor Cant has said, it has been proposed and seconded. So if we proceed to that motion, if members agree with your viewpoint, then we can obviously have a debate and vote on the item.
Right, I will move to the vote on Councillor Cant's proposal, seconded by, I think, Councillor Abbs. It would not necessarily completely truncate the debate, but basically we would not be moving to a resolution because there'd be no point. The whole point of the motion is that we are asking the district committee to actually make the decision.
Sorry, I was just going to say, once the vote's been taken, I think that's the item referenced up. It's not then a point for us to debate what then happened.
Right. Well, you can vote against the proposal, Councillor Culver, if you want to have your debate, but that's the way you'll have to vote if you want to have a debate tonight. I think we've given a chance for all those speakers who've made a presentation to make their case, and a lot has changed today. And I think the other purpose is for us to reflect on the change in Sport England's approach. So, well, I will move to the vote. Those in favour of the proposal by Councillor Cant, which is to reference this application up to the district committee, which probably won't now meet for 4 weeks because we're too late to get it on the agenda for the scheduled meeting next Wednesday. Those in favour, please show your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against? 1. I'm good. My vote's not needed, so that is carried. Have you got that, Mr. Oliver? Thank you. Right. I think the remaining 3 items can be got through after a short break, but we've had quite a long and increasingly hot period. So I'll call a break, adjournment for 10 minutes. You can get refreshments, comfort stop, maybe grab a banana is what I'm going to do. Thank you. Cheers. Mr. Till, are you ready? Sorry, we've resumed. We can't hear you.
I'm ready, yes. Sorry,
Sorry.
I couldn't hear you. Your microphone.
Right, well, I did have my button down. Don't know why you didn't hear me. Mr. Till, yes, could you please present the White House the case that we need to decide tonight?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just share my screen. If you could confirm that you're now looking at a location plan.
Yes, we are.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, this application is for works to construct a two-storey rear extension and make alterations to an existing dwelling. It's been called to committee by the ward members. No letters of objection or support have been received. Your officer's recommendation is for refusal. Members will recall that an application for a scheme of two-storey works to extend this dwelling was refused by the committee last year due to similar concerns to those raised by the officer in this application. The application site is located within the Donington Conservation Area and in the Donington Grove Registered Park and Garden. The public right-of-way begins directly alongside the site to the east. The site is outside of the defined settlement boundary and therefore considered to be countryside for purposes of policy. The existing dwelling has a character and appearance typical to a late 19th century estate lodge. These are the existing elevations. This is the access to the lodge and the Donington Grove estate beyond. This is the lodge viewed from the southwest along the access to Donington Grove. This is the lodge viewed from the west, viewed from the north, and further north within the site. And finally, this is a view of the lodge within the Donington Grove Historic Garden to the west itself. Members, as the case officers noted in our report, the proposed works would significantly increase the footprint of the dwelling with a set of two-storey extensions that would result in an increase in floor area of approximately 138 square metres, in excess of 120% larger than the existing dwelling. In this respect, I note that policy C6 of the Housing Site Allocations DPD requires the scale of an enlargement to a dwelling in the countryside is both subservient and designed to be in character with the existing dwelling. Members, in this respect, your officer's view is that the proposed extension is very clearly not subservient to the existing dwelling and has not been designed to be properly in keeping with it. I would like to note the following points: that the extended part of the dwelling will have a similar mass, scale and visual bulk to appear more as an attached dwelling than a subservient addition, and that, as the case officer notes in her report, while these revised proposals are of a more traditional design, the accumulation of prominent features in the form of new gables, gabled features above windows, larger windows and a bulky and visually prominent chimney would fundamentally change the character and appearance of the dwelling away from the rather modest and unassuming lodge that now presents itself, and into a dwelling that appears more as an attached pair while failing to establish any true visual subservience. In respect of scale, while the extension has a lower ridgeline than the existing dwelling, it's your officer's view that it is of a sufficient visual bulk, volume, mass and prominence to have an appearance tantamount to that of the second dwelling linked to the existing dwelling. This combination of increased scale and the visually prominent elements of the design would appear more prominent in the surrounding landscape and is sufficiently detrimental to the appearance of the host dwelling so as to merit a reason for refusal on grounds of poor quality of design, which fails to respect and enhance the character and appearance of the area. Members, I'd also like to draw your attention to the comments of the Conservation Officer and the Berkshire Gardens Trust, which note concern with the impact on both Donington Conservation Area and the Donington Grove Registered Park and Garden as heritage assets, due to the nature of the extensions being significantly out of keeping with their surroundings and detracting from the established relationships of existing buildings within the registered park and garden and the conservation area. The Conservation Officer also points out that national guidance on heritage assets places a duty on the council to assess any building that may have value as a heritage asset, whether it's listed or not. The Conservation Officer considers that White Lodge has value as an unlisted heritage asset in terms of its historic relationship with other buildings in the Donington Grove Historic Park and Garden, due to its former use as the gate lodge for the registered park and garden, and also points out that it actually forms part of the listing for it. The Conservation Officer's assessment is that part of the value of the lodge as an unlisted heritage asset lies in its modest and in-keeping appearance. Therefore, the Conservation Officer considers that the proposed works would appear unsympathetic and dominating in the context of the existing building, and would consequently detract from the character and appearance of the conservation area and registered park and garden. You'll note from the officer's report that no concerns are raised in respect of highways or the impact on neighbouring amenity. And on the update sheet, you'll note the details of the consultation with the Berkshire Gardens Trust that I've referred to previously. Members, in summary, officers consider that this is an incongruous and unsympathetic set of additions that lacks in visual subservience, dominating the views of the host dwelling, and fundamentally and unsympathetically altering the character of the dwelling in such a manner as to detract from its character and appearance within the registered park and garden. The extensions would furthermore fail to respect and enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area and the registered park and garden. So for the reasons set out at part 8 of your officer's report, the recommendation is refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Till. Is there anything that Mr. Goddard would like to add?
Thank you, Chairman. Only to state that your highway officers have no objection to this proposal. Access and car parking for the dwelling is not affected, and it is quite an extensive site. There is a gate being replaced with the proposal. However, there is a gate already in the same location. So no objection from highways to the gate. So no objection overall. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. We have nobody from the parish council. We don't have objectors either. We have the applicant's agent, I believe, or is it the applicant? Yes, the applicant's agent. Are you Simon Bainham? You're Simon Bainham and Callan Powers. If you move to the stand, I'm told that they've changed which button you use to make yourself heard. It's the left-hand button now. Can't remember why. Sorry, the wrong way around. It's the right-hand button you now use to get yourself heard. And I repeat, you have 5 minutes between you, and we will shortly have the stopwatch on you. Ready when you are. Okay. Ready when you are.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members, for your time in consideration of this application. I'm Callan Powers, the agent, and I will try to keep this brief as I'll be followed by Mr. Bainham very shortly. This application seeks planning permission for a 2-storey extension to the rear of an existing house. Policy C6 of the Housing Site Allocations DPD sets out a presumption in favour of extensions to existing houses in the countryside. Since this site was last before the committee, the footprint, width and height of the proposed extension have all been reduced. The appearance and architectural features of the proposal have also been changed, with overall a more domestic appearance being proposed than last time out. We hope that you will agree that revisions have significantly improved the appearance of the extension since that time, and the further drop in ridge height of the roof clearly demonstrates the subservience of the proposed extension. The proposal follows an earlier approved scheme for two-storey rear extension in which the ridgeline of the extended roof in fact matched the existing house. That scheme has an external floor space area of about 104 additional square meters measured externally. This current scheme, in which the roof ridge in fact drops below that of the main house, extends to 166 square meters externally, which, when factoring the removal of some small outbuildings, actually offsets quite a bit of that increase. While that previously approval has since lapsed, nothing has changed in terms of the policy position or local circumstances since that approval. The proposal is subservient to the main house, and as you'll have seen, the visibility of the extension from within the park would be limited. The extension's visibility from within the rest of the conservation area would likewise be very limited indeed. Limited, in fact, to the public right-of-way to the east of the house, where there would be a lesser impact when compared to the previously approved extension. I'll now allow Mr. Bainham to speak in respect of the site.
Thank you, Callan. First of all, I'd like to thank the committee for finding the time to visit the site. I bought the house with my wife 3.5 years ago, and at the time, planning consent for an extension had just been granted. I had a number of concerns about the consented scheme. Firstly, the eastern wall of the extension would have destroyed the hedge along the footpath for about 10 metres. This is a privacy issue as well as a planning and environmental issue. At the planning meeting last summer, the hedge seemed quite important to most of the members of the committee. If we set the extension back from the hedge, it would not only preserve the hedge, but also make the extension less prominent and therefore appear more subservient compared to the previously consented scheme. The other problem with the consented scheme is that it creates dark space where it connects. By providing an entrance or link with no habitable rooms in the link, this resolves the problem as well as protecting the hedge. But it does require a slightly bigger footprint to achieve the same amount of habitable space. In last year's proposal, I wanted to further distinguish between the old and the new by having a step up. In the new proposal, we have removed this step, which means that the height of the proposed extension is now lower than the existing house and, importantly, lower than the previously consented scheme. This also makes the extension less prominent and therefore more subservient than the consented scheme. I have listened to the concerns of the committee last time, and I have tried to address as many as possible. But I also want to overcome the problems with the consented scheme. The proposals in my view now create a better, less prominent 4-bedroom house than the 5-bedroom consented scheme. The improved amenity would not just be better for us as owners, but also for future generations. The house sits on a 1.2-acre plot, and therefore the proposals and extension, which are largely hidden from public view, could not be described as overdevelopment. The proposed extension is almost invisible from any public footpath other than the one from the west. You can see the extension from the west, but it sits against the silhouette of the house in the east, in the village. I think it's important to mention that there are no objections, as Callan has done. In summary, I believe that proposals compare favourably compared to the previously consented scheme and are less visible. This also, the plans provide a much better configured, usable house and better amenity in terms of sunlighting and daylighting. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I whisked along at 100 miles an hour.
You've done very well. You're 10 seconds short of the 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Are there any questions to the, yes, Councillor Culver, I saw you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming along this evening. Can you just confirm for me the approved planning application in 2017? Can you explain to me how this existing application this evening compares to the approved one in terms of the square footage and the length of the extension, etc.? How do the two compare?
I can't give you exact figures in terms of how far it comes out. The previously consented scheme ran in line with the side walls. This one does poke out to one side, although some of that is offset by its being inset on the other side. So I think I mentioned the external floor space of the 2017 scheme being an additional 104 square meters, with this current scheme extending to 166 square meters measured externally before taking into account the removal of outbuildings.
Any other questions? I see no questions being requested, in which case, thank you, gentlemen. Councillor Doherty, your ward member, 5 minutes is, we're ready when you are.
Thank you, Chairman. I hope I won't take the 5 minutes because I called this application in last summer and following its refusal was pleased to see that the applicant had responded to concerns that were raised regarding both the size and the design of this new proposal. I was therefore disappointed that the Conservation Officer has continued to object as a planning permission had previously been granted in this conservation area back in 2017, apologies, when it was considered acceptable to put a 2-storey extension into this area. So when the officers talk about the character being altered, there was already an agreement in place to alter that character from the 2017 application. I'm unsure what's changed since then, but I feel that the applicant has made every attempt to preserve the original lodge frontage. And it is the original lodge frontage that most people would see if they were going to come down the lane, as far as they're allowed to come down the lane, because it is actually private property. The rear of the property is very hidden, and anybody that went on that site visit will have seen how hidden that rear of the property is. Based on the plans submitted by Natural England, it considers that the proposed development will not have significant adverse impacts on the statutorily protected nature conservation sites or landscapes. And as I said, those that took part in the visit will know the property itself is really well screened, both from the Donington Grove Park and from any near neighbours in Donington Village. As a regular user of the park and its footpaths, I can assure you that the lodge is not visible at any time of the year. In winter, when the leaves are down, you still cannot see the lodge. As an additional measure, the applicant is going to preserve the existing fence and hedge to the rear of property. And I'm pleased to say that there are no objections either from the parish council or from any nearby residents. In 6.10, the Conservation Officer describes the approach to the lodge from Donington Village. I actually disagree with the interpretation of this. The first and only thing that you will see when you come to the white gate in the village is the lodge itself. The extension being set back behind will not be visible through this private approach. I do not support the conclusion that from this approach, the proposal would detract from the primary of the existing building's original purpose as a modest gatehouse set within spacious grounds. You will still see that lodge. The Conservation Officer continues to be concerned about the scale of the extension not being subservient to the original dwelling. Yet I feel the staggered design enables the existing dwelling to remain the focal point of the overall design. The new scheme is lower than the consented scheme, and when sat within a 1.2 acres of private garden, this will not look large. This application was due to be heard last month, but was postponed due to waiting for an additional consultation. But even while objecting, the additional consultee, Berkshire Gardens Trust, feel that we should note that in their view, the harm done by the proposed development is mitigated somewhat because there is no longer an entrance to the Grade 2 registered park and garden from the east. The land belonging to White Lodge effectively blocks this former entrance, and therefore the link to its former role as a modest gate lodge has already partially been severed to some extent. Finally, a reason for refusal of this is because it sits within a sensitive area. Yet I would highlight to the committee in this same area, Donington Grove Country Club has received permission for extensive works, including white UPVC glazed conservatory, and Top Barn at the top of the park has also been built and developed over the time in that park. So there are cases whereby other development has taken part in this sensitive area. That's what I wanted to add for the committee this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Are there any questions to the ward member? I don't see any, in which case we can move to questions. Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, can I just check that I had heard correctly from the officers that the 2017 application has lapsed?
I heard that. That was, I think, what you said, wasn't it, Mr. Till? So it cannot be implemented, the 2017 application.
I think you, Chairman. I don't think I don't recall saying that. However, it is the case that the 2017 application I have just checked has lapsed.
I think you did say it. I seem to recall that. So that answers your question. Any questions to officers? No, I see none. Shall we move straight to the debate then? Councillor Cole.
Sorry, I thought you said Councillor Culver. Sorry, no, I was looking at Councillor Culver.
I should say clearer.
Thank you, Chairman. When the original application was refused by this committee, I was very much, I did vote for the refusal. Simply because I'm a firm believer in our planning policies being there for a specific reason. However, but I have to say I hadn't done a site visit. For this application, I did do the site visit, and I have to say I changed my mind completely. I have the highest regard for our conservation officers. But I think looking at the building as it is, it's already compromised because if Mr. Bainham will forgive me, there's a very ugly flat roofed extension onto the original building, and and therefore, I think anything, this application would be an improvement to the building. It won't be seen from the approaches to from either way, really, because it is to the back of the property on a very, very large plot. I think the historic park and gardens Councillor Doherty has already alluded to is already compromised. I don't suspect for 1 minute that a golf course was actually constructed when the historic park was being developed. And therefore, officers have also referred to our policy with regard to dwellings in the countryside. But I think this dwelling could hardly be classed as being in the countryside because it sits cheek by jowl with Donington Village, only separated by a public footpath. So I think really officers in this instance are probably clutching at straws with regard to our policies. And although I'm a great proponent of our policies and defender of them, I think in this instance, I am prepared to make an exception to that. And I would vote that we refuse officer recommendation and approve this application. Thank you, Chairman.
You said that's the way you would vote. Is that a proposal?
I propose, Chairman, that we approve application against officer recommendation.
I have to ask, does that find a seconder? No? Well, in which case, let's continue with the debate. Councillor Abbs, you have your hand up. Oh, it does. I didn't see that. Right.
I'm happy to second that application, Councillor Vickers.
Right. I did call Councillor Abbs before I saw your physical hand. I was looking for hands on the screen. So I will let Councillor Abbs have his go, and then I will take you after that, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chair. Gosh, it was only a few months ago that we refused this. Generally, I will take the officer's advice unless I can see some clear, compelling reason as to why we shouldn't. The officer, Mr. Till, was very clear. I don't think he was clutching at straws. He came out with a whole bunch of reasons as to why it's not applicable. So unfortunately, I can't agree with Councillor Cole on that part of what she said. I was interested to see that there was a previous application approved 2017 and has lapsed. I suspect I probably wouldn't have been in favour of that either, but it's somewhat irrelevant now, except for to say, moving up from there, something that was approved from 104, was it, to 166 is a massive jump. And I can't really agree with most of the statements about just because I can't see it. I can't think how many meetings we've been in where, the fact that it's there, you could chop trees down, it would become visible again. There's all sorts of, reasons why these things are done. And so just because I can't see it at the moment doesn't mean I'd never be able to see it again. So I'm afraid I'm glad we've allowed a little bit of debate here, because I don't think anything significant has changed. I do appreciate that the owners have made some effort to improve the outlook and so on, but maybe if they'd come with 104, not 166, I would have been more inclined to accept the argument about,
Thank you, Councillor Abbs. I think before we move to the vote, we need to be sure that we know what conditions would be attached to a vote to approve, and there aren't any conditions, obviously, because the recommendation was to refuse. Mr. Till, would you suggest what conditions we might need were we minded to support the proposal to approve?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I can suggest some conditions. Those would be 3 years for commencement, development to take place in accordance with the approved drawings, the materials to be approved before any above ground development takes place, the parking to be laid out and provided as per the plans, provision of an electric vehicle charging point before occupation, removal of permitted development rights for any alterations to the roof in particular, and members may wish to consider whether any extensions and outbuildings should also be included within removal of permitted development rights. And provision of a construction method statement, and also provision of a plan for retention and protection of trees through construction works.
I assume that the plans include some detailed landscaping, which, because a lot of the argument, I think, is that this extension will not be seen because of the existing vegetation. And Councillor Abbs did make the point that, vegetation comes and goes. You were. Now you've muted your.
Councillor Vickers, thank you. I think a scheme of landscaping as well would be an appropriate condition to apply.
Right, we've heard the conditions. Are you happy with those, the mover and seconder? Councillor Cant, did you want to add something or take something away?
Just in terms of this, no say which way I don't, but in terms of the conditions, I think somewhere in here there's a requirement that the building shouldn't be separated under any circumstances to two separate dwellings. I guess, would that be a condition we'd want to include?
Did you hear that, Mr. Till? I think that's a reasonable one. I can't remember.
Yes, I can add a condition in respect of no subdivision of the building into more than one dwelling.
I'm looking at the applicant and agent, and they seem to be smiling. Thumbs up. Members. Mrs. Armour, yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I just think it might be useful if Mr. Till can maybe go through the reasons, because it is against the officer's recommendation, and I think we need to all be clear with the reasons why we're going against the officer's recommendation. I appreciate Councillor Cole set it out at length, but we haven't had much debate, so I just feel for everyone that's voting, it might be worth just re-going through them. And also, Councillor Barnett's got his hand up. So. Yes,
I was going to bring in Councillor Barnett, and then Councillor Abbs pointed in your direction, so I realised that you had something to say. Yes, I agree with that, and I think it's probably up to the, well, I'll defer to Mr. Till to suggest some reasons, and then look to the proposer to make sure that they are all covered. And then I'll come to you, Councillor Barnett. You're muted.
I would suggest, Chairman, that in this particular case, Councillor Coles referred to the secluded nature of the site and lack of external public views, and the development being reasonably well related to the application, the host dwelling itself in terms of design. and that it wouldn't alter views from the conservation area into the historic garden.
I recall that the view of Councillor Cole that the building's character is already compromised.
Yes.
I think that should be added.
Thank you.
Right. Councillor Barnett.
Well, Chairman, members, I haven't got anything substantial to add to the debate except to say.
Well, we'll be straight to the point. Had as a point of information, or you wanted to comment on the conditions or reasons. That's all. I think we need.
Well,
to
no. All I was going to sorry, all I was going to say, it was rather unusual for me to go against my colleague next door, and obviously support Councillor Cole. But even on the application that come forward last year, I was very much in support of it, and in fact, I was quite taken back by the presentation by Councillor Doherty at the time. And I think the only concern I had was regarding the type of trees and the leaves and the possible not being obscured. But I'm more than happy with this, and I should obviously be voting with the proposal that's on the table.
Right. Can we have a show of hands of those in favour of the proposal to go against officer's recommendation and to approve this, or recommend this one for approval with the conditions that we've heard? Those in favour? Against? There are 3 against, I think, and 6 for. I didn't see anybody abstain. No, there are 9 of us, so that should be at 6-3. Yes.
If you voted, yeah.
I voted for, yes. Just to add chairman's privilege, I mean, I used to, as I'm wont to do, trespass along that driveway, and it is a useful public right of way. But there you go, the owners asserted their rights, and we didn't have it on the definitive map. On to item 3 on the agenda. 1 Croft Road, Newbury. In fact, I'll read out what the proposal is for, and then I'll make an introductory remark myself. This one.
I think there's a member of the public that's here tonight.
Oh,
That's,
wants to speak?
yes.
Yes, I think there are.
There's one by Zoom and one.
Yes, yes, and I think they'll be happy with what the proposal is going to be, actually.
I think otherwise they should be.
Yeah, okay. Well, I will give them a chance to come in. Are both can they be allowed into the room? I think they can. Then they can hear the debate around whether or not we defer. Right. Would you like to take a seat and listen to? Are you here for the next item, number 1 Croft Road? Okay. You are. Oh, you are the agent. Well, thank you for coming. This is an application for a 2-storey extension to number 1 Croft Road, Newbury, to the side, 2-storey to the side and single-storey extension to the rear. Now, I've been lobbied, as has the other ward member, by neighbours on both sides. And unfortunately, because I was pinged by the NHS, with the chairman being away on Olympics duty and me being unable to chair the site visit. And I don't think there was a principal or particularly senior planning officer. To cut a long story short, I did feel that this application needed to be viewed from the neighbouring properties. And I would therefore like to defer the debate until there has been a chance for members to take that opportunity. And I did personally tell one of the neighbours that would be allowed, having not realised that we were still not out of the COVID restrictions. And so I was actually giving wrong advice. But I feel that it's now unfair to the neighbours if we were to move to a debate without some of you, I don't know, hands up those members who did actually visit the site. 1, 2, 3, 4. So less than half of the members. I have seen the site, but it was when the last application came forward, which was refused under delegated powers. So really less than half of us have had a view on this application. Mrs. Armour, do you wish to say something?
I do. I think that we still have to follow the procedure in the Constitution, unfortunately. And well, unfortunately, if you wanted to defer straight away, and there is someone here that wants to speak. So I think officers should do a presentation and then the person should be entitled to speak because they have come tonight. And
okay.
I'm assuming the agent isn't aware that this item is going to be deferred.
Are you the agent for the applicant?
Yes.
Ah, right. Now, you may not be aware.
I'm also aware that the neighbours were given opportunity to use the application for the above.
The neighbours weren't aware of the process, and indeed I'm partly guilty for having misled them as to what the process was. Normally the process would be that if the planning officer attending or the chairman of the committee attending the site visit felt from looking at the plans that it was a benefit to the committee to see the application from the neighbouring properties, and I've done this many times, then they would knock on the door. They wouldn't wait for an invitation. It's in the COVID regulations that we have changed our procedures, but some of us thought we were out of emergency and gave wrong advice to the neighbours. So I'm taking the advice of the legal officer. You will get your chance to present, but we may be moving after the presentations to a motion to defer, which obviously has to carry the majority of the members. So I hope you don't mind, but it is also, we have to, in these neighbour household applications, pay particular attention to the immediate neighbours who, of course, are the only ones affected. Thank you.
Yeah, just for point of information, please, Chairman, is that normal procedure that we would visit the neighbours' gardens?
Well, under the Venerable Derek Carnegie, I can remember 2 or 3 applications where it was felt necessary to do that, and providing the owners of the neighbours were happy with that. Obviously, you can't force your way into a property without the owner's permission. Neighbours are usually only too willing to allow members into their properties or even into some confined spaces in those pre-COVID lovely days. And it does make a difference in some cases to one's viewing of the application. Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chairman. As you know, at your instigation, I went to have a look at the neighbour's property over the weekend. And I'm absolutely the view that the committee needs to see from that side of the fence.
So we will hear you. You will have your 5 minutes, and we will put questions to you if we feel. But you may not get a debate and a decision tonight. That's all I can say at the moment. Right. So
No, Chairman, I have my hands up.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Councillor Cole.
I just know that we have an objector down attending via Zoom, but that person isn't attending. So this is going to be a bit one-sided if we're just hearing some, presumably that individual may have been told that the application would be.
I told the objectors that there would probably be a motion to defer.
Well, then
I couldn't give them that certainty because, of course, I couldn't tell which way you would vote.
But the objectors are not attending because
one of them can't on this occasion because their agent is on holiday, and the neighbour is herself working, indeed for the NHS as we speak. Well, and the other is available, I thought, and is down on our list as being able to attend on Zoom, and will have their opportunity to speak.
Is that Mr. Coleman?
That's Mr. Coleman, yes.
Mr. Coleman's not on the attendees, though. We've only got 3 attendees.
No, he is. Yes, I got him down as Graham Coleman on Zoom. Whether he's actually turned up, he is listed. He has duly informed.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, Chairman, is that he is not actually zoomed in. We've got 16 panellists.
All I can say, so there is no Mr. Coleman in the waiting room. A hand has just been raised, and by an individual by the name of Hannah Swain, who is not on the list. In the attendees list, so that the chances are that Hannah Swain, although it's not the name of the person, could be Mr. Coleman. I can seek to clarify if that's the case.
I mean, people do use other people's computers, and it comes up with a name that isn't the name of the person speaking. That's all I can think of. It's happened to me. on Zooms. The fun of Zoom. I mean, there's a certain parish councillor that always comes up as sue somebody, and he's a man on our parish council meetings.
Chair, just deconfuse the side of this. What's the point of going through the whole process and then deferring?
I'm not arguing with the point. We're talking about the advice we've been given from the legal officer is that we should proceed to have the presentations, and then we can decide whether to defer the decision, rather like we did on the first item tonight, where we heard all the presentations.
All right, so
Thank
it's
you.
there. That's
Right,
fine.
yes.
Sorry, would it be helpful if I sort of explain? I think my concern is obviously the vote isn't given which way it's going to go. And the Constitution does say that if someone's put themselves down to speak, they shall be entitled to speak. And I feel that we're doing a debate on deferral without hearing all the information. And I think we do need to hear the information. Something might be said that would mean you don't consider deferral an option. So I would, and especially since Miss Martin is here tonight, I think that would be fair.
Agreed. Thank you for that advice. Right. So can I ask the officer presenting? It's Maziwa again, I believe.
Thank you, Mr.
Can you tell us
Chairman.
about this application?
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Got a bit of a problem. Can everyone see the screen?
We can see your title page.
Thank you.
So we are sharing screens, I believe.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, so this application is at number 1 Croft Road in Newbury. We do have an update sheet, Mr. Chairman, for this application. It just includes an additional representation in objection. I won't go through the list of points made. They repeat the same concerns raised within the report. So the application seeks planning permission for a 2-story extension to the side and a single-story extension to the rear at 1 Croft Road. It's been called in by the ward member, Councillor Abbs, so that the committee can consider the massing of the extension. A summary of the representations are given at section 4 of the report. And the recommendation, Mr. Chairman, is for approval subject to the conditions set out in the report. The application property is a semi-detached 2-story dwelling with vehicle parking to the front and private garden to the rear. The lie on the land is such that the land slopes up towards the south in the rear garden, and neighboring properties to the west lie at a lower ground, which is number 37 Wendon Road. You can see on the plan. With regards to the attached neighboring property, number 3 Croft Road, concerns have been raised that this development would lead to a significant loss of light to the windows and patio area in the rear garden. It is acknowledged that this scheme would be constructed close to the common boundary between the 2 properties, as can be seen on the block plan. However, the applicant has submitted a comprehensive daylight and sunlight report by Right of Light Consulting, and the report concludes that the studies show that there will be limited impact on neighboring amenities. Officers have no reason to dispute the findings in the report because the tests that have been used are quite widely recognized, and the numerical results indicate that there will be limited loss of daylight and sunlight, including to the windows immediately by the boundary. There are no objections, Mr. Chairman, from the consultees, the tree officer has no objection, provided the proposed works protect the birch tree in the neighboring garden. And the highways officers have no objection. They consider that the planning application will retain 3 parking spaces, which is the requirement in this location for the size of the dwelling. The next slides will show the existing and proposed plans, Mr. Chairman, and elevations of the proposal. As we can see, we've got the existing and the side extension, which will provide an integral garage and the rear extensions to the property. This is the first floor, proposed first floor extensions. To the rear, the 2 extensions will be single story. This extension will have a mono-pitch roof, which has a contemporary design. There have been objections about this scheme regarding this design in terms of its impact on the character of the area and whether it would remain subservient to the main dwelling. It is acknowledged that the general character of properties in the immediate area is of a traditional design, but officers consider that the rear extensions, which we'll see, I think in the next slides, the rear extension, which is contemporary design, officers consider that it complements the traditional aspect of the dwelling. Furthermore, it is located to the rear of the property, so it can't be, it's not visible from vantage points from the street scene. There is large glazing on the single-story rear extension, as we'll see from the following slides. This is facing the rear, and we can see the mono-pitch roof there. There is some glazing, high-level glazing on the east elevation, but it's considered that there won't be any overlooking onto neighboring amenity due to the height of those glazing. And these photos just indicate the site, Mr. Chairman, in terms of the character of the area. As we can see in this photo, the site benefits from a driveway which can accommodate the required parking. This photo shows the properties that have been considered in terms of the impact on daylight and sunlight. And this shows the rear aspect of the site. As members can see from this, the site rises, slopes, but as indicated in the proposed plans, the levels are going to be flattened or leveled. Yes, so they're not going to follow the topography of the site in terms of the rear. This image shows the existing rear elevation and patio on the site, which will be replaced. And this shows the fence that's existing, looking towards number 3 Croft Road. As you can see, it is likely that the single-story extension will be covered at some point by the fence, but it will overlap over it. There's an existing fence to the properties towards Wendon Road in the rear garden. Again, this will limit any impact from the rear extension. And that concludes the presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Masiwa. Questions can be put later if we don't have a motion to defer before that. So we next have the objector, Mr. Graham Coleman. Are you there, Mr. Coleman? Yes. Right, I can see you. You know the procedure. If you don't, I will repeat it, as it's probably the first time you've been to one of these. You will have 5 minutes, and I will give you a 1-minute warning when you've got 1 minute left if you need it. and then members will be able to put questions to you based on what you've said for clarification, etc. So when you're ready, you may start your 5 minutes.
Thank you. Our objection to this planning application is based upon our reading of the council's own SPG document. It isn't been raised because of any future need of the family at One Croft Road to make alterations to their property to meet future needs. Among the key principles of the SPG are particularly effect upon neighbours. We believe this plan submitted has substantial effects upon neighbours, particularly when it comes to overshadowing, which the SPG says should be avoided. As you know better than I do, the SPG mentions a 60-degree rule with regard to ground floor extensions and a 45-degree rule with regard to first floor extensions. There's no documents been submitted that show that either the ground floor of the building at the rear meet this requirement, nor the monopitch roof extension meets the requirement. Regarding privacy, the SPG states that the rule of thumb is 21 metres between facing windows, and it says that reasonable privacy may be secured through careful design, if that's not possible. The distance between our ground floor at number 39 and at 37 Wyndham Road is 13 metres to the boundary. The SPG mentions that any variance in the ground levels to neighbouring properties should be considered, although the planning officer tonight has referenced it, is mentioned just briefly in the report from the planning officer. The difference in ground level is estimated at about 1.25 metres from our ground level to that of One Croft Road. If I can refer to the planning officer's report, paragraph 6.5, since the sense of spaciousness that currently enjoyed would not be widely affected at 37 Wyndham Road. 37 Wyndham Road has a boundary of a 2 metre high wooden panel fence. This would be replaced by something like 5 metres of brick wall with an overhanging roof of undetermined dimensions, unknown from the plan. Paragraph 6.7 mentions that the large expense of glazing and a variety of styles is common in the area. However, most of this glazing a number of it is facing both east and west towards neighbours, and could be a significant intrusion, particularly of light pollution, if not overlooking, particularly on the first floor monopitch roof, where the glazing would, any lighting, whether LED or not, would show into the first floor windows at number 3 Croft Road. Paragraph 6.8 mentions a small section of the monopitch roof would reach the same height as the first floor windows at One Croft Road. Again, it's difficult to ascertain exactly how high this is from the plans because it's very difficult to work out from the dimensions which aren't given. This would extend, the plan officer says, a good distance to the rear. Don't say how far, but we're assuming it's between 6 and 7 metres. The plan officer says that this would not dominate the rear elevation to an unacceptable extent. Perhaps look at the model, a photo of the 3D model, and ask yourself if 36 square metres of tiled roofing reaching to the boundary is not an overbearing aspect of this design. Paragraph 6.9 states that fence of 2.5 is only 0.5 higher than permitted development. Why should a 2.5 metre fence be required in a domestic setting? Paragraph 6.11, the planning officer refers to loss of light to 3 Croft Road, supporting this with the daylight and sunlight report, which with reference to 39 Wyndham Road is incorrect because it does not include our ground floor extension. Neither does it include the overhang of the monopitch roof.
1 minute to go, Mr. Coleman.
Thank you. But why is this document, the definitive document, not the SPG recommendations, I would ask? Paragraph 6.12 and 6.6 mention these glazed openings to the east and west. Only a small section which is above the fence. Why should they be above the fence? It cannot be stipulated they be below the fence level in the least. It's been very difficult to to ascertain the exact dimensions of this extension from the plans. Neither do we feel we've actually been given a fair access to the information flow from the planning officers. But thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Any questions to Mr. Coleman? I'll put it. Would you have expected and would prefer to have members have a site visit to see the sorts of things that you've been describing, particularly the size and position of the extension?
That's a question to me. Yeah, I think it would be helpful for members to see both from our lower level and also the adjacent house at 3 Croft Road to see the proposed development. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Right, we move on. Just members, I didn't actually call on Mr. Goddard. I don't know that the highways issues are particularly significant, but if members wish to put questions after the presentations, I will obviously allow that. Ms. Martin, sorry to have kept you waiting this long. It's now your turn. Have you done this before? Right. Well, you have 5 minutes, and I will give you 1 minute to go, and then 10 seconds if it doesn't look as though you're about to end the sentence, and if you look like overrunning. And it's the right-hand button that gets it speaking. And when you're ready, we will start the clock. Okay.
Members, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I would like to add that the drawings have been checked by Planning Officer Ellie Neal and been found to be scaled correctly and be accurate. So they're able to be scaled directly from the drawings I've submitted. The current application is drastically altered from the previous application, a result of my clients, Mr. and Mrs. Redford's careful consideration of the neighbours' concerns. The balcony element, 4th bedroom and 3rd story element have all been removed in their entirety, and the ground floor development has been remodelled to the rear in accordance with permitted development guidelines, and massing moved away from the boundaries of number 3 Croft Road and number 37 Wendon Road. Croft Road is an established residential area where there's presumption in favour of residential development, and the proposed side extension mirrors a similar extension at number 3 Croft Road. In addition, as number 1 and number 3 are a semi-detached pair, it could be argued that the existing 2-storey side extension to number 3 unbalances the appearance of the properties from the principal elevation, and the proposed side extension seeks to rectify this imbalance. The rear facade is contemporary and there's a modern palette of materials with off-white render. A new flat roof would be covered with sedums blending seamlessly into the garden landscape, and the visual impact of the ground floor extension be minimised by the natural slope of the long garden. As the SPG states, the complementary styles matching existing, it can be argued, carefully selected high-quality sympathetic materials to the rear fulfills the guidance to reflect and add to the appearance of the building. I can add that the overhanging roof of the guttering detail that's proposed to the side extension of number 1 mirrors an existing development already carried out at number 3, and the planning officer has no concern with the overhang of the guttering in this respect. So as per the SPG, by carefully matching the principal facade size, style and proportion of windows, colours, tones, textures, etc. of existing materials, head and sill details, and also replicating the bonding of new brickwork to principal elevation and matching the mortar type ensures that the new brickwork will blend with the old and show that we're doing our utmost to protect the character of the property and the local area from the principal elevation. We believe that the proposal do not adversely impact on the living conditions of the neighbours, as outlined in the independent report commissioned and undertaken by Mr. Charles McMahon with Right of Light Consultants, who concluded that, in summary, the numerical results in this study demonstrate that the proposed development will have a low impact on the light receivable by its neighbouring properties, 3 Croft Road, 3739 Wendon Road. In our opinion, Right of Light, the proposed development sufficiently safeguards the daylight and sunlight amenity of the neighbouring properties. I can also add that the overlooking is immaterial in this case, as the clear story windows are sort of over 3 metres off the ground, in which case it'd be impossible unless one was in the Guinness World Book of Records to actually overlook anyone through those windows. And the idea of light pollution is normally brought about in cases where there might be floodlighting, for example, a football pitch, and isn't, I would argue, applicable in this case either. The Highways Department team lead in his report on the 20th of May stated that the Highways Department at West Berkshire District Council have no comments regarding the following planning applications at 1 Croft Road. Even with the proposed extension to the side of the property, the front drive remaining is an excess of 6 by 9 metres, exceeding the recommended dimensions for 3 spaces for a 3-bed house in Zone 1. In conclusion, my clients, Mr. and Mrs. Redford, have done their utmost to reflect the local character and add to the appearance of the building, whilst making changes to support Mrs. Redford and enhance her and consequently the whole family's quality of life, as she is a disabled person. Mr. and Mrs. Redford have carefully considered their neighbours and made far-reaching and significant alterations to previous applications and demonstrate understanding and consideration of local concerns. They have also acted to safeguard the character of the principal elevation of their property and local area.
1 minute to go.
Enhance it sympathetically to the rear. Thank you. We've complied with the planning authority at all times and produced all required documentation. Mr. and Mrs. Redford have gone above and beyond to commission a daylight and sunlight report to ensure that the proposals do not adversely impact on the living conditions of the neighbours at considerable financial cost to themselves. They have also ensured the proposals compliance in terms of parking guidelines to the satisfaction of the Highways Department at West Berkshire Council, and the planning officer is happy to recommend approval. And that's what I would recommend, obviously, in this case. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Are there any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. You made a few statements there, one of which was the number 3 and number 1, the extension are similar.
Yes.
How?
The side extensions are that are proposed in this case, a 2-storey side extension, and the one already existing at number 3 Croft Road are identical.
So are you limiting they are similar simply to the sides? You're not suggesting.
I'm saying they're similar in terms of the principal and the side elevations. Yes.
Yeah.
And
So
the development has been granted in the case of 3 Croft Road, so it would follow that similar development would be granted at 1 Croft Road. There's also existing development to the rear of 3 Croft
Do you
Road.
mind?
Yes, of course.
You're referring to the side all the time, not the rear, aren't you?
I'm referring to the sides being extremely similar, and there was also existing development to the rear of 3 Croft Road.
Okay, so let me expand then. So
Yes.
we've established that the sides are a little similar.
Yes.
But the rears, are you saying that they are also similar?
I would say that they are similar in floor space, but not similar in character.
Floor space.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
But you wouldn't argue that there is an extension, a sizable extension to the rear of 3 Croft Road?
I'm not. I'm asking questions, if that's
Fine.
okay.
Yes, please
Thanks.
do. Yeah.
Great deal of emphasis has been put on the light report, but the previous speaker mentioned that it contains errors, incorrect assumptions. Would you concur that therefore that it would be risky for members to just assume that report is correct if it does in fact contain errors?
I think it is produced by a Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors independent right of light assessment. So I think it is, as his independence and his chartered status relies on him producing accurate reports.
Your assertion is that there are no errors in that report?
I don't think there are errors, no.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a question myself, actually. Looking at the plan, the proposed block plan, it does appear that the extension for number 1 is significantly further out from the building line into the garden than number 3. You did say that you asserted that they were similar in size. Can you explain why the block plan shows that they're significantly larger?
I'm saying they're similar in size in that a sizable rear extension has already been completed at number 3 Croft Road. I'm not saying that they're similar numerically. I've neither been to Croft Road to take out to do a survey there or to measure their extension. There is a garage already in place at number 1 Croft Road, and the extent of the proposals comes out to the end of that garage space.
Well, you've asserted that the dimensions scale correctly. I think you started your remarks saying that.
Yeah.
Well, if that's the case, then the block plan is distinctly showing a larger extension.
I didn't say they're identical. I said they were similar.
Right. Okay. Councillor Doherty.
Yes, just one question, please. On the, I think it's the proposed west elevation, there's 3 large windows. And I'm not sure if I heard this right. Will those large windows, I entirely get what you say about the roof glazing and not being able to see, but those 3 large glazed windows, will they be above the fence line?
They won't be above the fence line, no.
So there
Would
is
you, I have a model here if you would like to see. It's not an extra element because members already have pictures of the model that is there.
it was just the objectors mentioned that they thought those would be above there, but you're saying they won't be above the fence line.
I don't believe that to be the case, no.
Thank you. Thank you.
I can see no more hands up. So, Ms. Martin, you're done. Thank you very much for your contribution. It's now our turn as ward members. I will defer to you, Councillor Abbs, and I may add a few remarks of my own after you, but we'll keep within the 5 minutes. When you're ready.
Chairman, I thought at this point we were going to test the deferment argument.
You can make a proposal as part of your speech, I think.
Okay, do you want me to do it from the lectern, or am I okay sitting down again? Okay. Sorry, I wasn't quite ready to do that. I apologise.
Chairman, I do think in the interests of transparency, Councillor Abbs should speak from the lectern. I did speak from the lectern when I presented last time in early June for my...
well, Councillor Doherty didn't for hers just now.
I'm more than happy to do it either way. I'm really not worried.
Can we take advice?
Sorry, I think there's a particular COVID reason we're not doing that in our instructions. I'll just defer to the, is that correct? Yes. So I think in the instructions that have been set for hybrid meetings, it's for ward members to remain in their place while doing their 5 minutes.
Right. You were correct, leader. Councillor Doherty.
Sorry, I understand that's, well, Mr. Oliver's confirmed that's.
I definitely have a face for wearing a mask. That's for sure. Anyway, so whenever you want, Chairman.
I've started the clock.
Oh, thank you very much. Look, although members undertook a site visit, I believe the effect on residents surrounding the proposed extension was not correctly presented, and that a visit specifically to the direct neighbour is essential to fully understand what would result if you were inclined to approve the planning application this evening. As mentioned earlier, and hopefully we'll get to it, a motion is to be put forward for deferment to allow that to happen. But in the absence of that having been presented so far, I will carry on. Those that have undertaken a visit by themselves at the request of the neighbour will understand the expressed concerns already from the neighbour's perspective. And as the acting chairperson of the day, I did actually ask the officer about whether or not there should be invited in and to just, had anybody approached about being invited in to see it from a neighbour's. And I was told that nobody had made that arrangement. However, within 30 minutes of our kind of visit, said neighbour was already contacting ward members, which I happen to be one, saying what happened. To try and illustrate the concerns raised, I would ask members to refer to the 2 documents, the proposed section BB/East elevation and the existing and proposed block plan on the West Berkshire planning portal. This clearly shows an approximate doubling in the length of the house, the whole house that is, with over 80% of the additional length taken to a height close to the guttering of the existing property. So far from being a single-storey extension, it's not far off being a 2-storey extension. I'd also like to point out that almost all the drawings submitted for the application are hand-drawn and contain few, if any, measurements, but rather a scale to work from. Although officers are confident in their calculations, this committee has had previous applications where measurements have made a significant difference to our thinking. And I do urge all members to use caution when just assuming that these dimensions and numbers are correct, especially as we have already heard now from the objectors about doubt about the light report. And just to re-emphasise that, to remind members of some of the concerns raised relating to this, they are summarised in our papers. The plans submitted do not correctly identify the extent of the site or boundary positions. major issue, therefore. The oversailing eaves extend the width and projection of the extension, adding to the shading and loss of daylight to the attached neighbour. Daylight and sunlight report appears to be based on the line of the walls rather than the roof. It's all casting some very serious doubt on that report and some of the numbers we're being asked to accept. As one of the ward members, it has been made clear from several residents that they are not opposed to an extension in principle. The opposite, in fact. It is merely the specific size and layout that causes concern. I see this concern myself and urge the applicant to modify what has been proposed to further alleviate the concern. Everyone has a right to light. Given the lack of clarity on this issue, it appears unsafe for members to approve this application this evening. And having been able to defer so far, I urge you, if we get this far, to refuse the application on the grounds of loss of immunity, uncertainty around measurements and non-compliance with the SPG. Thank you for your listening.
I'd just like to add, there's very little I'd like to add in the 1 minute that is left to us as ward members. I think this has been presented as a cut and dried, there's no doubt about it, you should be approving the application. I think it is at the very least quite finely balanced. And, everybody has a right to apply for an extension, and we've heard the neighbours aren't against it. I'm not sure there has been that good liaison between the applicant and their neighbours. That's not the impression I get. We have great concern to the extent that at least one of the neighbours has engaged professional planning advice. And unfortunately, when the date of the meeting came along, that planning consultant was on holiday, and the applicant herself, who has a seriously ill husband, could not be available tonight. So I think in the interests of fairness, so that both sides in this argument have the right to attend and have their case heard. And also, as we will hear, I think, when we move to a proposal in a minute for deferment, those members that have visited the site, and they are a minority, do believe that it needs to be seen from both the property of the applicant and the property of the immediate neighbours who are objectors. And I think it was a misunderstanding due to the unusual circumstances that we're in. I'm going to stop there because I've gone way over 5 minutes. Apologies. No, I'm afraid you can't come back on that. No, sorry. It's up to the committee to decide whether they can defer for the reasons that we have explained, but no motion has yet been put. Mrs. Armour.
Sorry, I think it is up to the committee to decide. If they don't have sufficient information to make a decision, then it would be incorrect to make a decision. So, and I think from what people have said so far, I imagine that's what's going to be put forward shortly.
We will now move to questions to officers, if there are any, and then the debate will begin, I think, with Councillor Woodiston wishing to make a statement.
For a point of information before we do this.
Yes, okay.
The legal advice was that we would be able to introduce a defer moment after the members of the public had spoken. We've now had that. Can we not introduce it to test this? Otherwise, we're continuing to debate.
I think if you feel, having heard all the representations, that you don't have sufficient information to make a decision, then yes, you can.
So we can skip the questions to officers and move straight to a proposal. Councillor Woodiston.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to propose that we defer this application. I think there's some question marks over the height of the building, over some of the dimensions, which need clarification.
And I think you would also agree that having inspected the site, that we need more information with our own eyes if we can make it to a site visit as you did.
Absolutely correct, Chairman.
Yes, thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second that proposal.
Right, we have that motion proposed and seconded that we defer.
Mr. Till would like to say something.
Mr. Till, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Just before you go on to your vote, members, I'd just like to make a general point returning to the matter of procedure and committee site visits. It comes in two parts. The first being that the committee wasn't invited, the members of the public weren't invited to participate in the committee meeting as part of the COVID regulations. So it needs to be made clear that there wasn't anything untoward in the fact that invitation didn't go out. The second thing is a general point in terms of site visits. There is no requirement within the procedure for the committee to make a site visit to a neighbouring property. Officers do accept that it may be of benefit, but in the majority of cases, we would seek for members to make their decision based on what's visible within the site and public views. There may be cases where members choose to make an exception, and this may be one of those cases, but as a general principle, officers wouldn't accept that a site visit to a neighbouring property forms part of the committee procedure. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Tull. I would agree with you that it's not generally necessary to do that, but you have said yourself there are exceptional cases, and I can think of many where it was valuable for members to accept an invitation. I think it's the manner in which invitations are made during COVID that has caused the confusion, and I admit to being responsible for causing some of that confusion in this case. Thank you. So we have a proposal seconded, and can I have a show of hands of those that are in favour of a deferment for the reasons expressed? Those show. Those against? I can see one. Was your hand up against? You're abstaining. So that's one abstention, one against, and I think 7 were in favour. Thank you. That will be deferred. It's never good to defer without good reason. Otherwise, we're wasting everybody's time. But I think we had good reason on this occasion. I hope you agree. I think, Mrs. Armour, we do, in theory. It's up to, isn't it? It's up to those spokespersons, those representatives, whether they wish to come again, isn't it?
Yes, I think there might be different arguments raised. So it might be different information you're considering, because I think there's a number of matters that I think officers maybe from what need to look at with the comments tonight. So it could be that different information comes before you. I can't say.
Right, I think we can move on to item 4 on the agenda. Thank you. I'm sorry that you're... Hello? Yes, Councillor Cole.
Chairman, it is 20 minutes to 10. We're due to finish at 10 o'clock. The question has got to be decided whether or not we would be able to determine this application if we voted to go beyond 10 p.m.
I think we could, but we would need to.
I think we should take that
I think we can take the motion to extend to 10:30 now, because I think we're definitely going past 10. Yeah, can I have a proposal to continue until 10:30?
Reluctantly, yes, Chairman.
And a seconder? Seconded. Those in favour? Thank you. Presenting this one again is Simon Till. Mr. Till, the 4th application and last tonight is for the former Methodist church in Kimbury, change of use from redundant church to residential dwelling. I won't go through the rest of it. It's in our printed agendas.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I'll just share my screen. Can you confirm that you can see a location plan now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, this application is for the change of use of the existing vacant Methodist church building in Inkpen Road in Kimbury to provide a 3-bedroom dwelling. Your officer's recommendation is for refusal, and the application was called to committee by the ward members in order to discuss concerns with parking provision, highway safety, and the constrained nature of the site, and concerns with retaining the building in viable use. 12 representations have been received, 2 of which support the application and 10 which object to it. Letters of objection raise concerns in respect of levels of on-street parking and highway safety in the vicinity of the site. And during the site visit, concerns were also raised in respect to the impact on the amenity of the residential occupant to the south. Members, the application site is located within the defined settlement boundary of Kimbury, where there is a presumption in favour of sustainable new residential development. The proposed works to convert the building would be acceptable in principle in accordance with this presumption. In terms of associated visual impacts, the proposed works are mainly internal, with external alterations predominantly limited to alterations to openings. The site is located within the North Wessex Downs AONB and the conservation area, but the planning and conservation officers raise no objections in terms of design or associated visual impacts. In respect of neighbouring amenity, concerns were raised during the site that the presence of roof lights on the first floor and windows on the ground floor might result in overlooking of the dwelling to the south, particularly due to the absence of a fence between these two sites. While it's noted in concerns of the ground floor openings those openings would potentially generate overlooking, the windows are pre-existing, and as such, an element of mutual overlooking already exists between the two sites. Referring to your update sheet, in respect of the mezzanine bedroom and study roof lights, it is noted that the window to the north elevation of the dwelling to the south of the site faces this roof, but that the openings would potentially stand to overlook it, both serve a void over the lounge. In respect of openings serving the bedroom, these would be situated such as not to present any additional overlooking element beyond those in the ground floor, and would be angled so as to afford more limited views. However, should members be minded to approve this application tonight, they may wish to consider whether it would be appropriate to apply a condition requiring obscured glazing of the roof lights in order to address the material impact of perceived overlooking, notwithstanding your officer's recommendation of refusal. In respect of amenity space, members will note that the application site provides less than 15 square metres. This is well short of the 100 square metres recommended in the SPD for a 3-bedroom dwelling, or even the 75 square metres recommended for a 2-bedroom dwelling. Officers are therefore concerned that what is proposed is effectively a 3-bedroom dwelling that may be occupied by a family, that the proposed works would result in a poor quality of amenity space, failing to reflect the concerns both in the MPPF and policy CS14 in terms of improving the quality of life and providing a good standard of amenity. Turning to the issue of car parking, the site provides no car parking, which fails to meet with the council's standards. While your officers note that the site is within the defined settlement area, the parking standard is based on a realistic assessment of the likely need across the district, and as such, the proposal is likely to result in an additional pressure for car parking that would only be met in all likelihood with additional on-street parking in an already congested area. This would be of a different nature to that associated with the previous use as a Methodist church, with more parking at times of peak demand in the evenings. Turning to the update sheet, members will notice that in addition to the assessment of the impact on neighbouring amenity I've referred to already, there is also a mention of the existing fuel tank. The proposals have been assessed on the basis of this fuel tank being kept, and any noise and disruption resulting from this would be necessarily subject of environmental controls and civil legislation rather than being a planning matter. However, although it was received too late in consideration of this application to be included for consideration by officers and members, I'm aware that an energy statement document draft was circulated by the applicant, which members may wish to question him regarding. Members, while officers note that there are local concerns with putting this site to a viable use, our concern in terms of amenity space and lack of parking provision is that the proposals would result in a cramped form of overdevelopment, and that the future occupants would suffer for a lack of suitable amenity space, while the use would result in an additional pressure on an oversubscribed area of on-street parking, compounding existing difficulties. Therefore, your officer's recommendation is for refusal of this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Till. We don't have, would Mr. Goddard perhaps want to say anything? I think we've covered highways issues in Mr. Till's presentation. So unless Mr. Goddard feels that there's something important that's missed, I think we can move on. Mr. Goddard, I'm not seeing you.
I'm going to, Mr. Till has covered all my issues. Just to save time, I'll answer any questions that members have.
Right, we'll come to questions shortly. There being nobody from the parish wishing to speak, no objectors, we move straight on to the applicant. Tim Cork, there you are, yes, to the lectern, and it's the button on the right. You need to be fairly close to the microphone to be heard clearly.
Thank you.
When you're ready, it's 5 minutes and I will give you a 1 minute warning when that time comes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Before I start, before you set the stopwatch, can I just say that in the report from the planner there were some inaccuracies which I did submit prior to the report being given a few days back after the site visit, and they've not been picked up. So there were some inaccuracies in that. I hope
can you include that in your remarks? Just
well,
highlight the points.
But hopefully people will ask me those questions. So, okay,
right,
if you want to. Thank you. On the planning statement, by granting this application, my son and his partner, who has lived in the area all of her life, will be making the building their home. As an architect, I love the building and I'm keen to secure its future. We're very enthusiastic about saving it and creating a home in the village. Turning to the issues, parking, planning policy P1 is aimed at, I quote, new development. It does not cater for a change of use application of an existing building such as this. The committee report argues that under policy P1, the proposal will require 2 parking spaces, which can only be found on street. This is not entirely accurate, and this is the important point. It doesn't adequately explain the context. By granting permission to this application, the current D1 use class, which the building currently enjoys, will be extinguished forever. This D1 use class currently permits the building to be used as a place of worship, a teaching establishment, a creche, a day nursery, and a clinic, amongst other things, all of which demand significantly greater car parking and associated traffic movements than just the 2 parking spaces that would be needed to a change of use to a dwelling. The application is therefore for a net reduction in the current parking demand, not an increase. Although not mentioned in the committee report, as part of the application, a parking survey was undertaken covering Inkpen Road, Church Road, Station Road and the High Street. These areas were visited at various times of days, on weekdays and weekends, and photographs were taken, some at 10:30 at night. And we were able to show there and submitted photographs that showed that at all times visited, 2 parking spaces were available within a short walk of the site. It's just 2 parking spaces. They are there. Amenity space. The committee report states that under the SPG, the building should have, in my information, 70 square metres to be classed as a 2-bedroom house. Again, I would argue this policy only relates, and this is what it says, new development. It's referring to new build. Again, it's not appropriate for a change of use. It's not a new build. The proposal does, however, have 30 square metres of amenity space. I think, again, I've never been asked to give a calculation, but it's just shy of 30 square metres of amenity space. And to the rear, the orientation gets really good sunshine. It enjoys a high level of privacy, and the area will provide for a garden shed, an outdoor sitting and eating area, a garden bench, and plenty of planting. A flat, for comparison, with this level of private amenity would be classed as generous. Privacy has been mentioned. This proposal retains the existing obscure glazed windows to the side looking into the garden. So they're already obscure, so there is no privacy loss, and that will be maintained. And the roof lights will be placed high enough up the roof pitch to avoid any overlooking. Sustainability. One of the most environmentally sustainable approaches to creating a new home is to refurbish an existing building. Obviously, the existing building has already been built, so the carbon generated in the manufacture of the building materials and the construction of the building, it's already happened. So there is a large element of embodied carbon in the existing building. This means that the harmful greenhouse gases in the refurbishment process will be significantly lower than for a new build alternative. We'll seek to introduce modern standards of insulation to the roof and the external walls, and we'll be fitting high performance windows, roof lights and doors to significantly improve the thermal insulation of the property. It's the intention to remove the existing oil-fired boiler and oil tank. We're currently investigating an ultra-high efficiency electric boiler system which performs at 99.8% efficiency, and we'll link this to a green energy tariff.
1 minute to go.
Thank you. These installations combined will enable us to give the building a new lease of life as a modest home performing to high sustainability standards. So to conclude, by granting this application, the currently vacant building will become a home for a young couple with strong local links to Kimbury. The future of the building, which is in a state of disrepair, will be saved. As a home, it will be loved again, and it will be maintained now and into the future. The proposals represent an excellent opportunity to create a new home in the centre of the village, which as a refurbishment will have excellent ecological credentials. Removing the D1 use classification of the existing building will result in a permanent decrease in real terms of the parking and traffic demands that the building can currently generate. The planning application for residential actually reduces the parking and traffic
bring your remarks to a close,
which the site currently generates. So please permit this application and do the right thing for the building and the village. Thank you.
Questions to yes, Mr. Councillor Simpson. You need to use the microphone, Councillor Simpson.
Thank you. You're saying that your removal of D. You're
into the microphone. Sorry, I know you're not. You'd like to look at the person you're speaking to.
Yeah. You're saying your removal of D1 removes the actually removes some traffic. How long has this church been disused and empty?
About 2 years, just short of 2 years, I believe.
Okay, because the okay. That's my fundamental question, because I thought that, and was this a busy church?
Well, at the end, it wasn't. It was absolutely the opposite. It was. That's why the congregation disappeared. It went down to 6 people in the congregation, I believe, and that's why the building fell into disuse and is now vacant.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see any other hand. Oh, Councillor Wilson, yes.
You mentioned in your sorry, you mentioned your initial comments that there were some errors in the planning. I was wondering whether you might explain those.
So the
we weren't supposed to introduce new topics. Question of what the person has spoken.
You're quite correct, Councillor Cole, in that Mr. Cork did actually make that remark before I started the clock. So in a sense, as he didn't cover it in the 5 minutes that I was timing him, I think we'll have to ask officers, now we've got that hint that there is some new information we're not aware of. Okay, so you don't need to answer that question. I'd rather you didn't, in fact. Thank you. We can now, thank you very much, Mr. Cork, move on to the ward members. I believe Councillor Cole and Councillor Rolls are sharing the time. I will Somebody's upside down there. Yes. Councillor Cole, perhaps while Councillor Cole gets herself the right way round, you can start. When you're ready.
I think she's done so already.
Well, whichever way you want to start, the clock is starting now.
Chairman, thank you. I called this in originally the chairman of Kimbury Parish Council on the basis that the parking question was not being adequately dealt with. And I noted this was not a call in against any reuse of the building. There have been a number of objections, mostly on the subject of parking. Subsequently, my ward colleagues, Claire Rolls, your chairman, Dennis Pennyworth, and I met the applicant outside the building. The result of that meeting was the three of us agreed that the call-in should become one that was irrespective of officers' decision. So we felt the decision should be made in public and that there are issues of policy, 2 policy issues, because our planning officer also objected to the amenity space. There's a little bit more amenity space than he originally thought, perhaps near to 30 square metres. It's still small. But if this were a 2-bedroom flat or even a 3-bedroom one, as our planners grandly wish to describe it, we'd not be worrying too much about amenity space. It's not ideal. It is what it is, and it cannot be bigger without knocking part of the building down. Our policy feels a bit like a one-size-fits-all, but it doesn't fit here in the practical terms of an existing building. From the parking point of view, there's quite a set of photos on the website, and we saw what it can be like there on the site visit, which is why I tried to get a parking scheme for Kimbury through a couple of years ago, and can see myself having to try again. Obviously, the council can say, hope that some other non-residential use be found. But as the applicants already indicated, if this becomes a hall lettable for small meetings, it could go, which can be under the current D1 class, we're back to the old usage. You've been talking about this. It did vary from nothing to many cars parking whenever the then incumbents held a coffee morning to raise funds. That parking issue that some of you saw in the site visit could well become an everyday issue. So from the village's point of view, contrary to what the objector says, the option of change to residential may actually be better. I have also the heritage aspect to consider. Heritage champion, therefore with the conservation hat on, what is proposed is a sympathetic conversion that does no harm to the conservation area. In fact, from the point of view of the village, more harm would be done to the conservation area if the building is allowed to rot. Interesting, this. Proposition appears to be now, with new information that is available, very sustainable. Take an existing building, insulate it to make it acceptable in heating terms without using masses of new concrete, brick, stone, and heat it by electricity. There's not really the space there for air or ground source heating, but that building must be one where later in its life, solar slates will make sense. I got the impression from our planning officer that policy issues were borderline. I feel this is one for the committee to take a practical decision on. Claire?
Thanks, James. I'm not going to repeat what James has just said, all of which I agree with. I think there's just some key issues here. I think it's right that this has come to committee, and really based on the current D1 usage versus residential usage, I think I would really welcome the committee's views on that. So I'm not really going to add anything further, but I'd also urge members to ask the officers about the discrepancies in the report, which the applicant has highlighted, and I very much hope that they will take the opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Any members wish to question? Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillors Cole and Bowles. I wonder, could you say, do you think there is any potential for this building to be used by the community for any other purpose, like meetings, for example? Has that been tried, or has it just sat derelict for 2 years and nobody else is interested in using it?
It's sat derelict for 2 years. The community is quite well served for such buildings. The Coronation Hall just up the road is really quite a large hall. And there's another one the other side of the road between this site and the Coronation Hall.
There's there's also Kimbury Church has a parish hall as well.
It does. Yep. And therefore the sellers, the vendors, have not found someone willing to take it on. I'm not saying it's impossible at all. I simply say that if it goes back to a community use, it's likely to be, at least in part, commercial. If it's commercial, there'll be cars, there'll be traffic. And what we saw in that site visit will go back to being, well, quite a lot of it. And it's not great. I have told the applicant quite bluntly that if we do go back to doing a parking scheme, he can expect that there'll be double yellow lines outside that building. He's not worried about it. So verbally, at least, that is, if you like, part of the deal.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and Councillor Rose, Councillor Cole, thank you very much for your contributions. I think, do you have an opinion? I mean, obviously it was a Methodist church, and churches then generally tend to have the most on a Sunday. Very broad brushstroke there, etc. Historically, when was the problem as you saw it, or were you not familiar enough with the parking patterns to know whether? Because if you go to residential, it's definite. It's every evening there's going to be parking there, whereas churches don't work on the same cycle. Any comment?
I mean, I think to say that residential is just in the evening, it is, sorry, that's what you said, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was, yeah.
You know, there's sort of deliveries and things, aren't there, that may compound that. But I think in terms of being a place of worship previously, I mean, you know, for example, Kimbury Church is quite active on all days of the week. They hold various coffee mornings. It's a centre for, you know, the community to get together in other ways outside, you know, the Sunday services. So in that respect, you know, this could go back to a place of worship. I mean, based on the sort of, you know, the current situation post-COVID, it may become, there may be more of a commercial, you know, it could be made into something more commercial, which would generate more traffic. I think that's the point.
Yeah, I guess I was interested. We have a certainty with an application before us of something will happen, but we have an uncertainty if we don't approve it. And we're only here really to approve what's in front of us. So the fact something else may or may not happen, officers, I'm sure, will advise us, but you know, the certainty is it will. I must have. Well, it is. I'm trying to get into the. Yeah, do apologise. Yes, I'm trying to get to the bottom of whether Councillor Cole and Councillor Rolls are for or against this.
Actually, it's a really good question.
You see why we asked for it to go to committee.
Yeah, thanks.
I really welcome this at committee. It's one that is absolutely right to go to committee because it is a really tricky one. And I also think, can I just add, you know, parking in Kimbury, as most of you saw on that site visit, is a very emotive issue. Yeah. So we welcome your thoughts.
Thank you.
May I answer or attempt to answer as well?
There's a question, because I don't want a question, which way would you vote? Because I don't think that should be something we take into account.
No, whether they were for or against, Chairman, please.
I started out without any question. I called it in on the basis of parking.
Yeah.
Because the parking in Kimbury, real problem. 2 and a bit years ago, we got together a parking scheme to deal with the parking problem in Kimbury. And it was a good scheme. And yes, it did include double yellow lines outside that building. Parish Council supported it. And then the Parish Council unsupported it. And I don't think it's appropriate to go any further on that this evening.
No, I'll agree. Can we move on to questions? I'm looking at the watch and we do want to get a resolution.
I can't hear what's being said now.
Sorry, I think I was cutting in and going over you, but I think we're done. Thank you very much for your contributions. All right, members, can we see if anybody has got questions to officers? I think Councillor Culver, yes, you were first.
Thank you, Chairman. Under 2.1, it talks about a previous planning application, but it doesn't actually give a date for that. Do we know when that was granted, please?
The planning history that I have on the in the case officer's report, just bear with me to make sure I'm looking at the right report.
Members, I think Mr. Cork can help us. I think really rather than wait while Mr.
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't have a date.
I think that would be
that, but it would have been 1990s by the looks of the permission.
1994.
94.
Okay.
Thank
Was
you
that
very
for a
much.
similar size of dwelling? Was it for a 2-bed? Was it the same kind of thing?
It was for a.
No, I think we'll just leave it at that. I think that's a slight departure from, but I think it was helpful considering the officer couldn't answer it, that we got an answer. That's sufficient. Thank you. Any other? Yes, Councillor Simpson. Yes.
Thank you. A question either for Paul Goddard or for Simon Till. Do you have a handle on the current outstanding new build, approved new build in Kimbury, and also the target that Kimbury has in the forward LRP? Because it seems to me that if we don't make a clear expression of what we should do, we are prejudicing the arguments for what I consider to be the continued abuse of too much building of inappropriate houses made of bricks and mortar.
I have to say, I don't see that that is a relevant question, Councillor Simpson. We're talking about one additional dwelling, and I don't see that that's got a significant impact on total numbers for Kimbury, really, if that's...
And it's fine. We saw a very busy street. A house of this size generates typically, one new build generates between 5 and 8 movements a day.
Yes, I can't see a question for officers either. It's a statement when we come to the debate. Councillor Wollaston, have you got a question to officers?
I do. Going back to my original question, which I wasn't allowed to ask, can the officers perhaps indicate where the inaccuracies are in the report?
Well, you've heard from Mr. Cork that there are inaccuracies in the report. I'm not quite sure from reviewing my correspondence with him and the planning file exactly what inaccuracies he refers to. I'm going to take a guess from what I was told from the outcome of the committee site visit, though, that what he's actually referring to is that he doesn't accept that the study bedroom should be considered as a 3rd bedroom, which officers would dispute, because from what I've read from the plans, it meets the minimum size standards, which are about 6.75 meters, square meters for a bedroom. Also, from what I heard from Councillor Cole just then, there's a concern that the officer's measurement of the rear garden space may be incorrect. And I can confirm that Councillor Cole's correct, that it's approximately 30 square meters, not the 15 stated in the case officer's report, which is still far below our recommended standards for a dwelling of 2 bedrooms, which is 75 square meters. And thirdly, that the applicant feels that we haven't correctly represented his plans for sustainable energy and fuel efficiency for the site. And in that respect, the applicant did, as I referred to in my presentation, submit a sustainable energy statement. but he submitted that too late for consideration by officers or members. However, if members were minded to approve and want some form of commitment from the applicant in terms of sustainable energy solutions, then there is also always the option of applying a condition in respect to that matter. So I'm sorry I'm not able to provide a conclusive
That is helpful, I think, as far as it goes. Councillor Wollaston, would you agree? Yes. Thank you very much. Any more questions? Yes, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chairman. Just some clarification around the highway issues. So I understand the parking provision, that it mentions in the report about the safety, and unfortunately I wasn't able to make the site visit. So I just wondered if officers could clarify with me their concerns regarding the safety aspect of the highway provision.
Thank you, Chairman. Our objection is on the basis that the proposal before you does not comply with your parking standards and the housing site allocations DPD, being for what is assumed as a 3-bed dwelling requires 3 parking spaces. We're not objecting on traffic grounds because as has been pointed out, a single dwelling will generate over the course of let's say a week much less traffic during the day than a church would have generated, or uses similar to a church. Our concern is parking during the evening. Additional parking in the evening when other residents in the areas are at home. And this additional parking would cause additional congestion on the streets in the centre of Kimbury, particularly in Penn Road, and the congestion, the level of car parking would in effect have a high-risk safety issue. It makes the streets more narrow, only provides one-way working in many instances, and I think, as we've seen from many pictures, it does get quite congested. The residents, clearly from all the letters of objection that have been submitted, believe that there is a concern regarding parking in the vicinity, and the Kimbury Parish Council have also raised objection. I therefore would advise that you support officers' recommendation and support the highway's reason for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. Did you have another question, Councillor Abbs?
Did very quick one. If we were minded to approve, how big a hole does it blow in our policies when other people come along, and will they start citing this as something to allow something else through?
I think I should answer that. The situation here is a unique one in that there are public benefits potentially to retaining the building to be evaluated against the failure to comply with parking policy. Now, members may choose to give a different weighting to those public benefits in terms of retaining the Methodist Church building within the conservation area in a viable use. And that weighting may be considered to overwhelm the concerns in respect of the parking policy in this particular instance. So members, we wouldn't be concerned that the circumstances are such that could be generally replicated across the district, eroding the policy.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. Sorry, Mr. Till. I can see no more hands up for questions to officers, so can we please now move to a debate? I think we've had some very useful presentations on this one. I see Councillor Cole.
Yes, thank you.
As far as I can see, there are 2 issues around here, which is amenity space and parking. If we look at amenity space, commercial buildings that are converted to dwellings under permitted development right have little or no amenity space. So the fact that there's a limited amount of amenity space is, in my view, probably acceptable. We all like to think people have got more amenity space, but when I look at terrace houses in Sheffield, where I come from, people had a backyard, and if there was nowhere near 30 metres squared of amenity space. So I think we can get too hung up on that, as indeed with parking. Kimbury is as Kimbury. You go down Kimbury, houses are straight on the street. There is no parking. You can't magic parking space. You just have to accept the situation as it is. I accept Mr. Goddard's comments about our parking standards, which I think probably refer more to new build than conversions. Personally, I think it's a nice use of a redundant building, and I find it fascinating that people want to change a church into a dwelling, and I think however the building is used, there will be a parking problem, whether it's a church, a studio, some other amenity space for the village. There'll still be a parking issue, so I can't see that will never be solved, however the building is used. So I'm quite content to go against officer recommendation in this instance. Would you like a proposal to move it on, Chairman?
I think we can wait 1 2 4 more hands up, but before we end with those 4, I would like to hope that Councillor Kent and then Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I'll support everything that Hilary said. I've seen in many other places attractive buildings rot and deteriorate over long periods because people are very indecisive about allowing other uses. To me, it seems an ideal opportunity to preserve the building. I'm satisfied myself with the parking issues that have been raised and also the amenity issue. I see no reason at all not to grant consent.
Thank you. Councillor Barnett and then Councillor Wollaston, and I would look to one or both of you to, if we're all talking in the same direction, to bring this to a proposal. So Barnett, I don't think your light's on. Could you?
It's gone off. Oh, it was on a minute ago. Can you hear me? I was saying, to a certain extent, I do support the general sort of theme of trying to bring back into use old buildings such as church establishments to in residential. The only concern I've got is I was immediately concerned about the traffic issue soon as I arrived on site. And I think several of us, when we arrived, I found how difficult it was in Inkpen Road. But this was a typical example. We were talking about 1 Croft Road and the impact on 3 Croft Road and the back on Wendham Road. In this case, we were lucky. We were able to actually go to the next door neighbour and they invited us through their property into the garden. And I was actually amazed how close to the back door that this building would have an effect on their quality of life, one might say. And all I'm really concerned about is what sort of insulation would be in the new build if we are mindful of the alterations that exist in building, if we're mindful to accept it, on the impact on this neighbour. Not only there's a window which presumably will be obscured, but also they did make it quite clear that when services were held, they could easily hear exactly what's being said in the sermon and the singing. So, I have a little concern about what we are looking at in relationship to the effect on the surrounding residences. And for that reason, I'm inclined to go along with officer's recommendation and against the proposal that's on the table tonight, Chairman.
Well, standing order say when you've got a proposal, you should ask for a seconder. Is there anybody who is prepared to second a proposal to support officer's recommendations? I see no hands up, so I will move on to you, Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you. I'm just conscious of the fact that this building is a non-designated heritage asset in Kimbury. And I can't see any other alternative uses, frankly, rather than residential. So I think that the alternative is going to be we let it go to rack and ruin and fall down, which I don't think is acceptable. So I will propose this. I'd like to second the motion, please.
I think you're proposing it.
I'm proposing it.
You're proposing that we go against officer's recommendation. Is that right? Oh, did you make a proposal? I didn't hear that specific form of words, but I will take it now if Councillor Wollaston is happy to second, and I'm sure. So we have a proposal from Councillor Cole to go against officer's recommendation and recommend acceptance of the application, seconded by Councillor Wollaston. Can we please have some suggested reasons and conditions?
Yes, Chairman.
Yes, you want to come up with some?
Yes, very much so.
Have a go.
Having visited the neighbours, and there are two windows that are, I don't think they were obscured from memory, but they're rather large. They look directly at the back door. I think we need any windows on that side need to be obscured glass for sure. And if we can put some kind of noise insulation,
sound insulation, yes,
then we should be doing that, because otherwise they're going to be.
Let's actually, you probably should start with the reasons for going against officers' recommendations, and maybe go to the proposer and seconder for their conditions, and then if there are any others that officers would advise us to impose.
I think the standard conditions with regard to hours of working and construction, that sort of thing. We did mention sustainable energy, and I think that should be conditioned. Indeed,
zero carbon. Are we or aim towards?
Well, I think sustainable energy would be is probably. I don't know whether we could do zero carbon on.
No, because it's not a major development and it's not new anyway. So I think that's not policy.
I think sustainable energy, materials, obscure glazing as well. Chairman.
Councillor Cant, do you want to add some?
So only to say, Chair, that in terms of, you asked initially for reasons, not for conditions, for reasons for overriding the officer's consideration, and I would suggest something like Mr. Till suggested, that in order to retain a feature building in the village and put it to use and prevent its further deterioration, it's appropriate to grant consent in this situation, something like that.
I'd add one other, which I did mention at the briefing yesterday, which is, I think, although this isn't Newbury, parking, I think we can somewhat bend the parking restrictions with existing buildings, particularly when Kimbury is so well served with the mainline station to Paddington. I don't think, out in the sticks in Kimbury, you would definitely need quite a lot of cars to go with even a 2-bed, but not here. So I think that is part of the reasoning why one can go against officers' recommendation on the parking issue. Officers, comments before we put it to the vote? So we've got everything that we need to vote on. 5 minutes to go.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll run down the list of conditions that I've got, and then the reasons that I've accumulated. So in terms of conditions, 3 years for commencement, in accordance with the approved drawings, materials scheduled to be submitted prior to, hang on, no, that's not going to work. So materials to match the existing, provision of a construction method statement, a provision of a sustainability strategy for energy, obscure glazing on the south elevation. I'm presuming that refers to the first floor. And could I also recommend removal of permitted development rights for alterations, extensions, alterations to the roof? And finally, a restriction on hours of work.
I think sound insulation, because of the proximity and the experience of sounds of worship being heard through the wall, maybe it's both laws.
So a scheme for insulating the
Scheme for
building
insulating the building on the
correct,
south side. Yes.
on the south.
Mrs.
Okay. And in terms of reasons, I had that the benefits of retaining the heritage asset should be weighed favourably against the potential concerns in respect of highway safety and amenity. And also that Kimbury is very well served by access to rail as a sustainable means of alternative transport.
Yeah, I'm more than happy, and I'm just looking at the clock. There's 3 minutes. I think unless anyone wants to add anything to the conditions, I'm certainly happy with the reasons.
Right. We move to the vote then. Yes, we got that. We got that. So we have a proposal to go against officer's recommendation and accept this application with those conditions and for those reasons. Can I have a show of hands of those in favour? Against? 1 against, 8 in favour. Thank you very much. Particularly that last one, I thought was well done, and thank you, ward members, for calling it in. That's good use of your powers, and thank you all of you for putting up with such a long evening on a very hot evening as well. And I wish you safe journeys home. Thank you all.